Hello, good morning. Thank you for coming on a Sunday morning. But I hope that you realize that for a UPSC aspirant, there is no Sunday. You have a different calendar without days. Exam देते समय दिन मत भूल जाना. Right? So, it doesn't matter. There is a Sunday. For everyone, there is a Sunday. For you, it doesn't matter. Every day is the same. Every day you have the same task. Right? So every day is a Sunday for a UPSC aspirant. Meaning every day is the same. That is the meaning. Right. So, in the last class, we had started talking about regional cooperation. Now, what is this happening? So, in the last class, we had started talking about SAARC. In the last class, we had started talking about regional cooperation. Right? Regional cooperation in South Asia. We had started with as much as we required understanding what is a region and then what is regional integration, what does it entail, and then with through some examples how this process has taken place. So we have some preliminary understanding that South Asia is a latecomer to the process of regional integration. The benefits of regional integration were realized and in different parts of the world. So there is a fashion, there is a trend that countries follow. If something is happening around the globe, you would sooner or later start finding it in the foreign policy of your country also. So regional integration was a trend, most visible in regions like Europe, but also close to India, Southeast Asia. So South Asian countries also thought to join the bandwagon. But we understood that the region in which we live has a certain characteristic. What is that? That these are post-colonial states. So they are in a way still learning how to run a state, how to build a state. India is in much advanced stages. I would say thanks to our early generations after independence, because we built institutions, we had a constitution in place. Right? It is easy to forget what happened 75 years ago because उस समय YouTube, Facebook ये सब नहीं होता था. आज है. And our neighbors in various ways are struggling. So you can find, if you want to find challenges of state building, look at Sri Lanka, look at Pakistan, look at Nepal, look at Bangladesh, look at Maldives. So India is in a pretty advanced stage in that sense, in terms of building institutions, in terms of mostly ensuring that there has been a peaceful transfer of power in the democratic system. Our democracy may be flawed, but certainly it has advanced. That is not the case in South Asia. So we understand there is a sensitivity towards sovereignty. When states are new, they basically are sensitive about sovereignty. That means they are more inward looking. They are more concerned about their own internal issues, territorial integrity, sovereignty, right? Order. So that is one. Second, we have bilateral contention marking the relations between different countries in this region, and that has meant that this region has lacked a certain degree of trust which is required when you want to move forward together, right? You can only move forward together when you trust each other, right? So regional integration is a team game. It's not a single person game, it's a team game. So that team spirit is not there, we can say. That South Asian spirit is not there. And remember, in the first class I told you that we can imagine South Asia as a region which was integrated in the past, which underwent the process of disintegration, and which is also then now attempting some sort of reintegration. So integration can be imagined in various ways. We are thinking about political economic integration. So thereby, what did we learn in the last class? That South Asian countries in 1985, based on the proposal of Bangladesh and other smaller countries, created the organization called SAARC, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. एक तो इतना बड़ा नाम दे दिया, right? And the name resembles a predatory creature, right? अच्छा सा कुछ नाम देते, like a panda, to promote cooperation. But SAARC, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. So about any organization, you should be aware of certain basics. For example, when was it formed? So SAARC was formed in the year 1985. Yesterday we had talked about it. SAARC secretariat is located in, secretariat and headquarter are the one and the same. All right. Sometimes people ask me, what is the, you have not told me about the headquarters of SAARC. Secretariat and headquarters are the same. Right. So secretariat of SAARC is in Kathmandu. You know this. How many members does SAARC have? 8 members and 9 observers. So this is also a very common question. What do observers do in an organization? Well, they do literally what the name suggests. They observe the proceedings of an organization. They are invitees. All right? शादी में बुलाया गया इनको. But they are not the bride and groom. They are not the family of the bride and groom. Right? शादी में आप भी जाते हैं अगर आपको बुलाया जाए तो. But who बिना बुलाए भी चले जाते हैं. Well, I am aware that when you are in university or college days, it happens. ऐसा होता है. हाँ, तो चलिए कोई बात नहीं. फिर भी आपका status वही होता है. That of an observer. All right. You don't have any substantive decision-making power. Right? You don't have any substantive decision-making power. कि आप decide करेंगे कि खाने में क्या बनेगा. या what would be the procedure of marriage. So observers generally engage with the proceedings of the organization depending on their interest in the organization. So it's basically a nominal status that you have. You don't have any substantive role. It depends on whether you are interested in that region, whether that region is interested in you. If that region or countries of that region are interested in you, they would invite you as an observer. आपको बुलाएंगे. शादी में आपको कोई क्यों बुलाता है? They know you or they are interested कि आप आए उनकी शादी में. All right? That is why they call you. So either you are interested in an organization, or you will make an effort to engage with them. So observer status is the starting point. अब आपको SAARC का member तो नहीं बना लेंगे क्योंकि South Asia में there are only 8 countries, right? So observers don't have a substantive role in an organization. They observe, they interact with the members. Sometimes what happens is when there is an expansion of the membership, observers may be prioritized. They would be the first one to be a part of an organization when there is an expansion. तो ऐसा होता है कभी-कभी observer members बन जाते हैं, right? But this is clear that only members have a substantive role in any organization. They take the decisions, what happens there, right? So who are the nine observers? कोई बता सकता है? 9 observers? हाँ, yes. USA, ईरान, ऑस्ट्रेलिया, जापान. देखो बिना अल्फाबेटिकल ऑर्डर के शुरू करोगे तो भूल ही जाओगे. सो हैव अ बेसिस ऑफ रिमेंबरिंग थिंग्स. स्टार्ट विद अल्फाबेटिकल ऑर्डर. ऑस्ट्रेलिया, चाइना, यूरोपियन यूनियन, ईरान, ईरान के बाद जापान और मॉरिशियस, म्यांमार, यूएस, South Korea, right? These are the observers. These are the countries which have been made observers at SAARC, right? So, can you think, I mean, I'm saying an obvious exclusion in your mind. Which country do you think should be an observer, is not an observer? Huh? Russia, right? So, sometimes UPSC asks questions indirectly. Who among the following are not an observer at SAARC? And they will give you a list. 3 countries are observers, 1 is not. So Russia is the most obvious exclusion. दुनिया में 193 देश हैं, but that is something very obvious. Why? Because India has good relations with Russia, right? So that is one way of looking at the information. Rather than simply remembering all the 9 names, also being aware of who are not the observers. So that is one thing. Now, when SAARC started functioning, so at that point in time it had 7 members. Afghanistan is the last to join SAARC in the period of 2005 to 2007. Afghanistan was the last. But in any case, we understand that because of these factors as we discussed, sensitivity on sovereignty, or lack of trust or bilateral contention. What we find is that SAARC started with a limited agenda of cooperation. All right. To begin with, SAARC had a limited agenda of cooperation. Right. So SAARC works on the basis of regional program of action. So this is the agenda of SAARC. It included issues like culture, people-to-people ties, environmental cooperation, agricultural cooperation. So it was limited because there was one consensus that this agenda or SAARC's work would not involve any bilateral issues. So SAARC is not a forum to raise any bilateral issues. One, and then depending on the sensitivity of multiple countries, SAARC started with non-contentious issues. SAARC basically was limited because countries had this preference that no bilateral issues, no contentious issues. So that's why it started with a limited agenda of cooperation, and the reason was this. This meant, as I had told you yesterday also, smaller countries thought smaller countries are always distrustful towards their larger neighbors. So they wanted to come together but also limit the influence of larger countries. And Pakistan thought India would dominate, so it would also like to add certain issues. For example, it would not like to discuss issues like terrorism or security at SAARC. India generally would not like to discuss bilateral issues. India made it sure that this does not become a platform where issues related with India mainly are discussed. So that's why no bilateral issues and no to contentious issues. So it started with the easiest of tasks in the form of a regional program of action which focused on areas like agriculture, people-to-people ties, culture, environmental cooperation. Right. So now let's move forward and see what happened as a result. So what we see, if we look at the achievements of SAARC, it is easier to recount achievements of SAARC. What has SAARC achieved? So first of all, SAARC has been able to promote interactions on regional issue. This is something that you can give to SAARC, that at least at some levels, SAARC was able to promote the idea of that you can talk on regional issues. Bilateralism is fine, but you can also talk of regional issues. So it provided a platform where there was interaction on regional issues. So we are saying that at least something is happening here. Second, SAARC has been able to institutionalize to a certain degree, institutionalization of regional cooperation, which means creating institutions. There is a concrete basis for cooperation. Institutionalization means having structures like secretariat, right, or SAARC regional centers, right. So these kinds of structures were built by SAARC or SAARC Development Fund, right, SAARC Development Fund. So secretariat at Kathmandu, multiple regional centers, but we will remember, for example, the SAARC Disaster Management Center is in India, where Gandhinagar, all right, provisionally it is right now in Gandhinagar. So that is something that we'll remember, right? So it has been able to institutionalize to a certain degree, secretariat or regional centers or SAARC Development Fund. SAARC Development Fund came into existence in 2010 and it is located, its secretariat is at Thimphu. Thimphu is the capital of Bhutan, right? It is located, its capital is located in Thimphu. So that is one achievement that you can talk about or you can mention about SAARC, that it has been able to institutionalize to a certain degree, right? Thirdly, we can say it has been able to put in place certain major agreements, right? At least at the level of agreements, you have agreements like A1, you have SAARC declaration on terrorism. For example, SAARC as a regional body adopted a declaration on terrorism in 1987. Terrorism as a, not as a bilateral issue, but as a general challenge that was emerging in this region. So this kind of an agreement, or SAPTA, South Asia Preferential Trade Agreement 1995, or SAFTA, South Asia Free Trade Agreement, right? 2006, signed in 2004, came into effect in 2006. So SAFTA or SAARC Declaration on Terrorism 1987, SAPTA, South Asia Preferential Trade Agreement, SAFTA, South Asia Free Trade Agreement, and then in 2014 you have SAARC, 2014 you have SAARC Energy Agreement. SAARC Energy Agreement. SAARC Energy Agreement. So that can also be said to be an achievement of SAARC, that it has at least been able to show some outcomes in terms of agreements or declarations, agreements and declarations. So that is another thing that you can provide or you can attribute to SAARC. Beyond this, it would be difficult to recount what else SAARC has been able to do, right? So that is basically the achievements of SAARC: institutionalization, a platform for interaction, and also an intent for progress in the form of agreements, right? So that's what we have seen. So SDF generally is a project finance window that has been created by SAARC countries with the intent of financing projects which are agreed upon at the level of the organization, right? So it, for example, proposed 3 windows: social, economic, and infrastructure windows. These are the 3 kinds of financing that generally SDF had proposed, right? Social projects, economic projects, and infrastructure projects. So in these, the social window, these are called windows of financing. So the social window is operational. So what kind of projects are social projects? What kind of projects are social projects? Social projects सुना है आपने? Social project क्या होता है? What is a social project? हाँ, health, poverty eradication, women's empowerment, right? Skilling. These are social projects. Economic projects mainly trade. All right, trade initiative को strengthen करना was one of the purpose. And infrastructure, basically you understand infrastructure, roads or other connectivity measures. So that is what SDF wanted to do. So there has been an intent also, right? There has been an intent also. And you would also see that SAARC has made multiple declarations. For example, every meeting of SAARC, summit of SAARC, has a declaration associated with the city where the summit took place. And these declarations always talk about poverty eradication, right? So there have been declaration, poverty eradication karenge, unemployment we will combat together. But generally they have remained limited to declarations only. Implementation has been a bottleneck that SAARC has faced. So these are the achievements of SAARC, right? Now let's simply understand a few things about SAARC. So we understood the basics. Now SAARC's highest level of meeting is called the summit, and it is also the highest decision making body. And a summit is simply, in international relations, a meeting of heads of states and heads of governments, a platform where heads of states and heads of governments participate. That's why it is called summit. That's why obviously it is the highest decision making body. So SAARC summits, right? Highest decision making body. The decision making method at SAARC is based on unanimity. Sometimes it is also mentioned as consensus. All right, unanimity, meaning everybody has to agree for any substantive decision to be taken. So that is basically how SAARC functions. SAARC summits take place now every 2 years, and generally, if you have a question on what basis countries host summit, generally in most of the organization summits are hosted on an alphabetical order. All right, so that किसी के बीच में ego clash नहीं हो. Right, alphabetical, rotating alphabetical order is the simplest formula that countries use to organize or host summit. Who would be hosting the summit? It is not like Olympics कि वहाँ पे Olympics कैसे host होता है? Bidding, countries bid and the committee, Olympic committee decides who hosts. तो वैसा नहीं है. Generally, for most of the organization, it would be safe to say that the summits are hosted in an alphabetical order, right? So you can pretty much be sure who would be hosting the summit the next time, right? So basically, just look at it in the context of most of the organizations. Certainly true for SAARC, right? So 2 years. And how many summits of SAARC have taken place so far? How many summits of SAARC? 18 summits of SAARC have taken place so far. The 18th summit was hosted by Kathmandu in 2014. The 19th summit was supposed to be hosted by Pakistan, Islamabad, but it has been indefinitely postponed. It has not taken place. So after 2014, no summit of SAARC has taken place. And this decision of holding a summit every 2 years was only taken in 2014. Before that, the provision was every year there should be a SAARC summit. So even when there was provision for every year a SAARC summit, then too you can notice that SAARC has only had 2 summits, 18 summits so far, right? So in more than 30 years, only 18 summits. So that is something that you can see obviously at the level of SAARC. So now we have understood the factors that are important for understanding or for the purpose of the examination. Understanding is a lifelong process. You can continue doing that. But what is relevant for SAARC? So thereby, from the perspective of the examination or analysis, there are few questions which are important, right? So let's make some questions. We can ask 3 questions to ourselves about SAARC to clarify the understanding, the current level of understanding of SAARC. 1, for example, we can say it has been argued that I have started writing because when I dictate, somebody or the other is missing it out, right? Can you please repeat it? So now it is here. It has been argued that SAARC has not been successful. SAARC has not been successful in promoting regional integration in South Asia. All right, SAARC has not been able to promote regional integration in South Asia. What are the reasons for this? Also suggest measures to make SAARC effective, right? Also suggest measures to make SAARC effective. First question, what is the first question? The nature of question is that what are the limitations of SAARC? SAARC's performance has been limited. SAARC's progress has been dissatisfactory. So this is a general opinion that you will find in most of the writings, that there are limitations at SAARC. There is a certain degree of dissatisfactory performance of SAARC. in promoting regional integration. What does it mean? What are the reasons for it? Why is this so? Also suggest measures to make SARC effective. समझ में आ गया आपको? So generally there you would find sometimes in the examination questions with statements. These statements are simply an opinion about what has been asked as a question or what is the subject matter of the question. So you don't contest it. You take them as statement of truth and you generally try and substantiate it in the introduction, right? What does it mean? To give the examiner a sense as to what is your opinion or what is your understanding of what has been asked. And then the substantive part of the question is the last two, right? What are the reasons for this and how can it be made effective? So solution, right? Problem has been given to you. Clarify the problem if you can as briefly as possible and then go to the next part, identify the reasons and go to the next part, suggest the solution. That is the general nature of most of the questions. Sometimes it is very clearly set out in 3 parts, sometimes it is not. But that is the attempt in most of the questions. So, statement based questions, what do you do? How do you start? They make your introduction easier. So, first of all, you can start in these kinds of questions like this, according to the World Bank. According to the World Bank, South Asia remains the least integrated region, right? So, according to the World Bank, South Asia remains one of the least integrated regions. That's one way of starting. Another way of starting is in more than 3 decades of its existence, in more than 3 decades of its existence, SARC has held only 18 summits. All right? Or you can say the postponement of the 19th summit of SARC indicates its limitations. All right? So you can start in many ways. You can start by quoting a report. So that's why you keep on reading newspapers. From time to time, such reports are cited by whosoever is writing on a subject. Right? So अब यूपीएससी की तैयारी करने के लिए आप हर चीज में एमईए की रिपोर्ट और वर्ल्ड बैंक की रिपोर्ट डायरेक्टली जाके तो पढ़ नहीं रहे, बिकॉज दैट वुड मेक इट टीडियस. सो दैट्स व्हाई यू रीड न्यूज़पेपर. दैट सम वाइज पर्सन वुड बी राइटिंग, and when a wise person is writing, they would be mentioning something like this. When something like this is mentioned, it is important for you, right? What has happened over the years is this: UPSC preparation has become too much PT centered, preliminary centered. So what has happened? Information. See, preliminary examination is no doubt a challenge, but what is the benefit if you clear preliminary examination and then you are stuck at the level of mains? Ultimately, the purpose is to clear the exam, not only the mains, the examination as a whole, right? ऐसा थोड़ी ना बताना है कि मैंने मेंस दिया है या मैंने इंटरव्यू दिया है. So you ultimately want to cross the hurdle. So just understand the significance. Preliminary examination is elimination examination. It is difficult. So be careful. Start practicing as many questions as possible as November, December comes. Simple formula. Secondly, it is in the mains examination that you have those 1750 marks, जहाँ पे आपको score करना है, around 1000 marks, right? 1000 marks तो एक ideal हो गया, but around 900 कर लिया तो you are secure. So that is basically what people tend to forget. That ultimately that is where the challenge is, because पहले तैयारी करने आए तो हर कोई बताएगा कि prelims बहुत मुश्किल है, बहुत मुश्किल है. It is obvious. prelims is difficult because it is unpredictable many a times. So the only thing is that you keep on practicing as many objective questions as possible. Understand the logic in it. But ultimately you have to write. So writing is important. So structuring your answer. So you can start in many ways. So World Bank says that South Asia is one of the least integrated regions economically and politically. So that's one. How do you get this information? If you keep on reading newspapers. Secondly, the information that you have, you can use it. For example, if SAARC has existed for 3 decades and has only been able to host 18 summits, that obviously indicates what? That even a simple purpose of meeting has not been fulfilled at SAARC. SAARC countries have not been able to regularly even meet. All right, forget about taking tough decisions. Or if you are in that year or you are close by, you find something current, right? That, for example, if you were in 2016, you would have written the recent postponement of the SAARC summit. So that basically is current, that what is happening currently. So SAARC summit, A19 summit was postponed and it has yet not taken place. So SAARC summits are not taking place. So that shows continued logjam. So you can start in all these ways, or you can combine all these in your introduction, जो भी आपकी ability है. So that is how you can start, right? So all these ways of starting are simply substantiating what is the statement of the UPSC was saying. So UPSC generally gives you a very general statement. If you can make it concrete by using information that according to the World Bank, right? Or only 19 summit has taken place, only 18 summits have taken place, or recently 19th summit was postponed. So that you are telling the examiner that you are aware of the subject matter, you are aware of the current debate also. That is the purpose of an introduction. To tell the examiner that yes, he can trust you, he or she or they can trust you, right? And they can read your answer with trust, right? Meaning by ignoring certain mistakes that you may have made. That is what you do through the introduction, right? But the purpose is all of them are saying, they point out to, ultimately you are saying that they point out to the limitations of SAARC as a vehicle for regional integration. That is something that you can say, right? Or you can use facts. For example, World Bank says that intra-regional, one example can be intra-regional trade in SAARC has been or is or stands at 5%, close to 5%, meaning SAARC countries don't trade enough with each other. The trade between SAARC countries is 5% of their trade with the rest of the world. So intra-regional trade in SAARC or between SAARC countries is around or less than 5% according to the World Bank. And that, if you compare it EU or ASEAN, the figures are much high. More than 50% of intra-regional trade in EU is more than 50% trade in EU is intra-regional. Close to 30% of trade in ASEAN is intra-regional, meaning they trade with each other more than rest of the world. So that also shows you that despite the 3 decades of existence of SAARC, South Asia remains a least integrated region economically as well as politically, right? So that is establishing the premise. If UPSC gives you a general statement, you make it specific. Try and make it specific as early as possible, simply to showcase that you know what the issue is. Now the second part of the question, reasons. जब मैं आपकी तरफ देख रहा हूं तब बोले, अभी तो मैं यहां लिख रहा हूं रीजंस फॉर लिमिटेशंस ऑफ, पीछे आंखें थोड़ी ना है मेरे सर के कि मैं आपने सर बोला और मैं शब्द भेदी बाण भी नहीं चलाता हूं, तो अब बोलिए। हाँ, आप बताइए। नहीं नहीं, तो अंदाजा लगाइए। हाँ, टेररिज्म तो आपको पता है। तो बेसिकली इन दैट ईयर व्हाट हैड हैपेंड, हमने पाकिस्तान पढ़ लिया ना, अब कोरिलेट करना शुरू करो ना। इन 2016 व्हाट हैड हैपेंड, Pathankot air base was attacked, and then there was Uri attacked. Pulwama 2019 में था, right? So these two attacks happened, and whenever these attacks happen, there is always a question how to respond to Pakistan. One option that India always adopted was diplomatic isolation of Pakistan. So India did not want to give credibility to Pakistan by participating in a summit that it had hosted in the same year, in which it was also visibly responsible for terrorist attacks in India. So that was one option that India exercised. हमने सुना ना पाकिस्तानी केस में हम हमेशा options ढूंढते रहते हैं. So that is one exercise, that option that India exercised of diplomatic isolation, that we would not be comfortable in participating in the summit at Islamabad. India's statement was very simple, and that was asked in the examination as a question, that some countries or Pakistan continues to interfere in the internal affairs of other countries, and this is not conducive for progress at SAARC. ऐसा इंडिया ने पोजीशन ली, and if one country does not participate in a summit, summit can't take place. That's as simple as that, क्योंकि जो decisions हैं वो यूनानिमिटी के बेसिस पे होता है. So you can't have a summit unless all are participating. So that is why this is what India in that particular year did. And then India was supported by Afghanistan, India was supported by Bhutan, India was supported by Bangladesh. Right? These were the countries who decided not to participate in the summit as well in that particular year without India's participation. So ऐसा हुआ था उस साल में 2016. So 2016 एक केस में हम जान चुके हैं उसके बारे में, पाकिस्तान. Generally, so basically start trusting your knowledge. Start trusting your knowledge and start correlating things. And in any case, we would have come to that, right? So, what are the reasons for limitations of SAARC? Now, I would ask you, what are the reasons? What are the reasons that we can say limit SAARC? Lack of trust, right? Sensitivity. That is also, we can say, sensitivity on issues of sovereignty. Third, चलिए ये हो गया. अब third, what can be the third point? देखो, you all know everything, but there is an order of priority. What is the most important thing that you think? ऐसा थोड़ी ना point Americans की तरह. Precision shooting नहीं, मतलब आपने बस you start spraying bullets or you start carpet bombing. What is the structural and functional issues? Okay, structural and functional issues. Can we say bilateral contentions? Bilateral contentions. So these countries lack trust. These countries are sensitive on sovereignty issues. So generally what you see is this translates actually into lack of trust is very intangible. Saying that they have sensitivity on sovereignty is very intangible. Tangibly you can show it by saying that there have been real, actual, bilateral contentions between countries. India, Pakistan. Sometimes you would also see contentions between other countries and India. So bilateral contentions. Generally relations or issues, relations between India, two of the largest members, India and Pakistan. So postponement of summits not taking place have happened in the context of India and Pakistan having tense relations. So that is the thing. And then you can also identify certain structural issues. What are the structural issues? The structural issues is you can say the decision making process. So a decision making process based on unanimity has given veto to even a single member to halt progress on any particular issue, meaning SARC itself requires that every member agrees. So even if one member disagrees, issues cannot move forward. So decision making process based on unanimity is a challenge. So basically, for example, we can give an example here. Example 2014, the SARC motor vehicle agreement, SARC motor vehicle agreement could not be adopted. SARC countries wanted to adopt a motor vehicle agreement, but because Pakistan had reservations regarding it, so SARC countries could not adopt a motor vehicle agreement, right? Because one country did not want to or was not comfortable with that idea at that point in time. So that is something that we see always happen. And institutional weakness. For example, Secretariat of SARC located in Kathmandu is even less endowed as compared to many of the government departments in India, right? So only when you have adequate technically trained manpower which is efficient in bringing about technical progress, negotiating, drafting, etc., you would be able to make an organization successful. Most of the work generally is done by the bureaucrats, the technocrats. आपके ऑफिस में ऐसे लोग चाहिए. स्पीच तो हम सभी दे सकते हैं. All right? So leaders give speeches, but the real work happens at these institutions or structural elements of any organization. So structural weaknesses such as weaknesses at Secretariat, right? Lack of financial allocation, lack of human resources at the Secretariat. So these are structural weaknesses that you can use as technical issues at SARC, right? Fifth, lack of complementarity in economies. Lack of complementarities in economies of South Asia. That South Asian economies are not complementary. They are competitive. Generally, every economy is competitive, but only when you have a degree of complementarity, you can think that arrangements like PTA or FTA would be successful. Lack of complementarity in South Asian economies, which means what? क्या आपको इससे क्या मतलब समझ में आता है? ये मुझे बताइए. Give me a sense. Especially someone who has not understood this. ऐसा आपको लग रहा हो किसी को भी कि आपको ये बात समझ में नहीं आई, तो वो मुझे बताएं. या आपको क्या लगता है इसका क्या मतलब होगा? जो लोग बताते रहते हैं उनसे आगे भी चलें जरा और नए लोगों से बातचीत हो. Lack of complementarity in economies. What does it mean? Someone who has not ever spoken in the class. Would you please help me? किसी बताइए आपको क्या लगता है? इक्वल लेवल पे नहीं है. ठीक है, उस एक मतलब ये हो सकता है इसका. एग्रीमेंट होते हैं वो पूरे नहीं हो पाते हैं. नहीं तो हम पूछ ही रहे हैं क्यों नहीं हो पाते हैं. हो नहीं पाते तो पता है हमको, हम पूछ रहे हैं क्यों नहीं हो पाते. हम रीजन बता रहे हैं दैट लैक ऑफ कॉम्प्लीमेंटैरिटी इन इकोनॉमीज. सो बेसिकली व्हाट डज इंडिया वांट टू सेल? We do not endorse each other's products. Maybe we lack market for each other's products because we have the same products. What is it that India would like to sell to the world? Agricultural commodities. For example, let's say basmati. Pakistan would also like to sell basmati. है ना? India would like to sell mangoes. Sri Lanka also has mangoes. India has coffee, tea, rubber. Sri Lanka also has coffee, tea, rubber. Bangladesh has textiles. India also has textiles. So basically that in simple terms would mean that there is we want to sell the same goods. So we are good at trading with the world, but we are not good at trading with each other. right? There is a demand for our goods in rest of the world, but our markets just don't have enough space for each other's goods. For example, in India, we can think of exporting cotton to Pakistan, all right? And then India's cotton would be cheaper for Pakistan, and its textile industry then can manufacture export-worthy goods. But right now, India and Pakistan are not trading. So if you read, some of the people in Pakistan's industry are saying that, oh, it was better if we imported cotton from India, right? Similarly, if we can think of those arrangements wherein India is seen as a market, when India is seen as a market, India is a large market, these markets are not large enough, then also things can work out. But generally, our emphasis has been on protecting our market abroad rather than finding our market close by, right? So that's why what we see is we have a fragmented value chain. We have political sensitivity, sovereignty sensitivity, so that's why trade doesn't become an option. For example, you see the PTA, Preferential Trade Agreement between SAARC countries, only came into existence in 1995, SAPTA. But SAPTA was marred by the fact that there were significant categories of goods which were reserved by countries not to be a part of preferential trade agreement. So they wanted to protect more rather than include more goods in this particular category. So PTA was not able to bring about any significant change in the volumes of trade. Nahi hua, trade nahi badha, because already political contentions hai, and on that economies are not complementary. So PTA did not succeed. PTA had structural weaknesses. For example, it did not have a target, it did not have a timeline, right? And it left too much in the hands of individual countries, right? Which goods they would like to make a part of PTA, which goods they would not like to make a part of PTA. Similarly, फिर हमने एक better agreement किया, SAFTA, South Asia Free Trade Agreement. The idea was the implementation starts in 2006, and in 10 years, by 2016, there is a South Asia Free Trade Area. Again, what happened? So, SAFTA was better than SAPTA because it had a timeline, right? It had a target. What target it had? That tariff range would be reduced between 0 to 5%. That South Asian countries would be trading on the basis of a tariff range of 0 to 5%. 0% tariff ideally, but highest tariff 5%, right? So that was the range, that was the target that SAFTA had, and countries were given time to implement this, reduce tariffs, import tariffs on goods. So there you have the provision for least developed countries getting 10 years. Least developed countries के पास 10 साल था to adopt the provisions of SAFTA, reduce tariffs, and non-least developed countries like India, like Pakistan, like Sri Lanka were given 7 years to reduce tariffs. So even this first step of reduction in tariffs across the range of traded goods was not achieved. India met its target, so India reduced tariffs across 98% of its commitment. So that's why you would see most of the countries in South Asia get a free access to India's market, especially if they are least developed countries. So India fulfilled its commitment specifically in the context of least developed countries, but other countries still had reservations, still could not do so because there is a protectionist tendency. They would like to protect their market, right? If India as a large producer, India produces everything. If India starts exporting to these smaller economies, then they think that domestic manufacturers would suffer. Everybody thinks that, right? India also would not like to open its market in certain areas. So that is what happens when your economies are not complementary. And in the case of South Asia, apart from non-complementarity of economies, you also have political problems. So that's why when SAARC started, countries had not put trade on the agenda of cooperation. We remember agenda of cooperation was limited. It is because an area like trade was not part of the agenda of cooperation. right? But that is because smaller countries always think that larger countries would benefit in terms of free trade agreements. And it happens also. Only when you are an efficient economy, only when you are well prepared, you would be able to take advantage of a free trade agreement. In a free trade agreement, generally the country which is a larger economy and a more efficient economy wins, right? And that is basically the story of economic integration in South Asia. SAPTA, not successful. SAPTA does not exist in any real sense. The agreement is there, some progress has been made, but we don't have the declaration on a free trade area in South Asia, right? ASEAN has a free trade area. European Union has a common market. South Asia has only agreements. Some countries making progress on it, other countries not making progress on it. So one reason is lack of complementarity of economies, that they are competitive. They want to sell similar things. They don't have space in each other's markets for the goods from the other country, or they want to protect certain sectors of their economy from external competition. And if you understand India's economic trajectory, you will find India also would have liked to do so in the context of rest of the world. We didn't sign the RCEP. RCEP सुना है आपने? Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. We didn't sign it, right? Because Australia was a part of it. And how, in what ways Indian and Australian economy are not complementary? In the sense of agricultural commodities. India is a large agricultural country, agricultural exporter. Australia also is. Australia's main exports generally are raw material or agricultural commodities. So that's why we have difficulty in signing a free trade agreement with Australia, right? The dairy sector or the agricultural sector would suffer. So different reasons. You can think how countries' economies are not complementary, right? In terms of basket of goods or in terms of their preferences, right? So that is something that has been a case. So unless you have a solid basis of cooperation, regional integration would fail, right? If, for example, these countries were able to make progress in one area, success begets success. सुना है आपने? Success begets success. Once you succeed in something, what would happen? You would have the confidence कि अब मैंने कर लिया. जब तक आप successful नहीं है, तब तक आपको अपने पे हमेशा doubt होता रहेगा. Once you get a success, you get confidence. So you build on that success. So that's why generally it is seen that ऐसा होता है ना कि in some attempts people get lower rank and they go into non-preferred services, and then in the next time they give interview. So once you are in the list, UPSC also starts favoring you, right? Generally people who have been selected in the previous years would get better marks in interview, right? Success begets success. So when you are facing problems like in preparation, think of a small area and be successful there, right? जैसे आज मैं 5 पेज पढ़ूंगा या पढ़ूंगी, I would read 5 pages. So that is a small success that you can build on. When you read 5 pages, ऐसा तो नहीं होगा वो consistently सारे लोग पढ़ते होंगे, consistently लगे हुए हो. How many of you are very consistent in your studies? Very consistent. Few people are very consistent, very good. Some people are born with that ability. All right? कुछ लोग अच्छे होते ही हैं, इसका क्या कर सकते हैं? So those of you who are not consistent, you may have various reasons. आज मन नहीं कर रहा, आज संडे है, आज बारिश हो रही है, आज गर्मी है, right? But whenever you complete your task, do you recognize that feeling? When you have completed the task, अंदर से अच्छा लगता है, अंदर से अच्छा लगता है ना? उतना ही अच्छा लगता है जितना शॉर्ट्स देखने में लगता है. So basically grasp that feeling. Remind your brain how it feels when a task is completed. Wire your brain towards success. Build on success. So if South Asian countries had reminded themselves that together we stand tall and separated we fall, so maybe there was a chance. But ऐसा कोई motivational speaker नहीं मिला इनको. All right? इस बीच में motivation बहुत सारे लोगों को चाहिए होता है, तो इनको कोई motivational speaker नहीं मिला. So they have not been able to build on that success. So that's why these issues persist. Then integration cannot succeed if there is lack of connectivity and infrastructure. If there is a lack of connectivity and infrastructure, regional integration cannot succeed. So it is argued, Ambassador Shyam Saran says, that geography is the most important capital or asset that South Asian countries share. Right? What do you share? Geography, a common geography. But only because you have an asset, it does not mean that you would always realize it in terms of its potential or realize it in terms of profits. Asset हो सकता है आपके पास, right? For example, you may have a land, but unless you try and invest in that land, make it cultivable, you are not going to get any profits from that land. है ना? आपका net worth बढ़ाएगा वो, but ultimately you would not get any benefit. So unless these countries make an effort to actually transform this geography into connectivity, they will remain in the state that they find themselves right now. Right? Geography is there, translate into action. So this region has always been lacking connectivity and cross-border infrastructure. Right? So if you go to Europe, you will find that their highways are very good. A river like Rhine is used for trade and transport. If you go to these countries, you will find that they have built an impressive infrastructure. Good highways. You can travel on road from Germany to France to Belgium to Netherlands, across most of the Europe in short span of time. So that is also reflecting in the way these countries are integrated in European Union. On top of that, they have certain agreements like the Schengen Agreement. सुना है आपने Schengen Agreement? There is a region called Schengen area in Europe. That is an agreement-based region, meaning around 26 countries in Europe have abolished border controls, meaning you can seamlessly move across the continent from one country to another. So that basically is an indication of how integrated these countries have been. Infrastructure was one. So Europeans were fortunate or not fortunate in the sense that Second World War के बाद कुछ बचा ही नहीं, तो वहां से क्या कर सकते हैं आप? When you hit rock bottom, you can only go up. वहां से नीचे जाने के लिए कुछ बचा ही नहीं. So then they had a compulsion of rebuilding. So that's where the roots of infrastructure building are. And then second thing, Americans came up with Marshall Plan. And then World Bank was also created to help these countries only. Development meant at that point in time development of Europe. Africa, South America, Asia, you can wait. So that's the origin of these organizations. But still we see if infrastructure was built, if there was a need for cooperation, this opportunity was grasped by these countries because they had those leaders and they had these circumstances. So it has not happened. There is a need. For example, the 2010 summit of SAARC had declared 2010 to 2020 to be a decade of connectivity, right? So despite 2010 to 2020 being a decade of connectivity, SAARC countries were not able to make much progress on that. You will find this in speeches also, right? At that point in time, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh also emphasized that better connectivity and infrastructure is required for regional integration. But somehow lack of connectivity and infrastructure keeps South Asia disintegrated rather than integrated. So this is the sixth reason. What is the seventh reason? The seventh reason can be, we can say that integration or approach to integration has been top-down approach, meaning reliance more on leaders' meetings, more on the initiative of governments, less on people. So that's why we see that we can say that there is a lack of a South Asian brand or South Asian identity, right? How many of you think of yourselves as South Asians as well? I'm not saying first South Asians. Of course, all of you, if I ask, would say that I think of myself first as an Indian. है ना? यही कहेंगे ना आप? But I think of myself first as me, the name that I was given, the family that I come from, the education that I had, and as an individual. Then, if I am in a good mood, I think of myself as a human being. And then, जब time मिलेगा, तब मैं सोचता हूँ कि oh, I am also an Indian. I hope nobody is going to lynch me. But I am telling you about human reality. रात में सपने में सोच जब when you are going to sleep, are you thinking about how I would tomorrow defend India against Pakistan? ऐसा सोच रहे होते हो आप? क्या सोच रहे होते हो? कल क्या पढ़ना है? What is the problem in my family? ऐसा होता है कि नहीं होता है? So what is the point in not acknowledging that reality? Of course, nation is a reality. Nation is there. You should all be proud of it. But anyone's identity is multi-layered. You can think of a multi-layered identity, concentric circles of identity. हो सकता है कि नहीं हो सकता है? Right? A biological being, a social human being, है ना? Social being, political being, citizen, son, daughter, sister, so many things. But how many of you have ever thought of yourselves as South Asians? Indian सोचा होगा, individual सोचा होगा, सब कुछ सोचा होगा. How many of you ever thought of yourself as South Asians? नहीं? Because you have not got the opportunity, na? How many of you have ever met people from any other part of South Asia? Of course you have met, right? आपने भी मिला है, आप भी मिले, तो उस समय आपको सब ख्याल आया कि आप दोनों साउथ एशियन आइडेंटिटी शेयर करते हैं? ख्याल आया आपको? पक्का? उन्होंने याद दिलाया कि आपको याद आया? उन्होंने याद दिलाया कि आप साउथ एशियन हैं. जनरली व्हाट वुड हैपन if you go to states, United States of America, you will find that Pakistanis identify themselves as, बहुत आसान है कहना, Indians, right? Many of the Indian food outlets are actually run by Bangladeshis, right? Pakistani people or people from Nepal, ऐसा होता है. So एक तो तरीका हो गया ये देखने का कि मेरा देश इतना महान, एक ये तरीका हो गया, आप भी सही हैं, राइट? एक तरीका ये हो गया कि देयर इज अ कॉमन बेसिस ऑफ आइडेंटिटी. कॉमन आइडेंटिटी कैन बी इमेजिन्ड, राइट, बियॉन्ड व्हाट वी हैव बीन टॉट. सो देन इन यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स यू स्टार्ट आइडेंटिफाइंग योरसेल्फ एज साउथ एशियंस, राइट? इंडियंस largely would be put in the category of Asians. Then Indians said that Asians generally is a reference to people of Chinese origin or East Asian origin in US. So now you have an emphasis on South Asian identity, South Asian origins. So any level of identity becomes effective in the right context. So when you go abroad, it becomes easier for you to think of yourself as South Asians. Indians तो आप सोचते ही हैं, but when you go abroad, you will meet people from South Asia. है ना? हमारे जैसे देखने में, हम सभी देखने में एक जैसे हैं. We share certain cultural traits, civilizational trait. फिर वहां पे अगर आप अरेबियन पेनिनसुला के लोगों से मिलेंगे तो ऑब्वियसली डिफरेंशिएट करना आसान होगा. यू वुड बी एबल टू रिलेट मोर विद पीपल ऑफ साउथ एशिया, राइट? सो फॉर एग्जांपल, मेनी पीपल कम फॉर प्रिपरेशन टू दिल्ली और फॉर जॉब्स टू दिल्ली. People don't, people coming from different parts. For example, let's say southern parts of India, Tamil Nadu or Kerala or Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Maharashtra. So then what is the first thing that you look for? You look for certain degree of familiarity. In Maharashtra or in Tamil Nadu, your Tamil identity is not as much important because it is obvious. Everybody is a Tamil there. Everybody is a Marathi speaking individual in your state. But when you come to Delhi, when you find that most of the people don't speak your language, your comfort is with anyone who speaks your language. इसी basis पे आप relate करना शुरू कर देते हैं. So it is possible to imagine yourself as South Asians, but it is difficult in the context that we live in, right? Emphasis on sovereignty. क्या इंडिया में केवल, पाकिस्तान में भी है, बांग्लादेश में भी है, नेपाल में भी है. माई ओन लैंग्वेज, माई ओन आइडेंटिटी, एवरीवन इज प्राउड ऑफ देयर आइडेंटिटी. देयर इज नथिंग न्यू देयर, राइट? All of us are very proud of who we are or our identities. But it is possible that you can think abstractly and you can think in terms of categories which have not been taught to you. It is possible that you can think of yourself as South Asian. It happens in certain context. किसी context में हो रहा है इसलिए आप ये नहीं कह सकते कि नहीं ऐसा नहीं हो सकता, right? But it is most important that there is this awareness at the level of people who are sought to be integrated. So the process of regional integration in South Asia has lacked the involvement of people, has been a top-down process, meaning governments have tried to bring about integration. Though people, culture are part of South Asia, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, but there is lack of awareness, right? So that's why it becomes very difficult to teach SAARC. India, Pakistan, everybody is aware, right? Of commonality, of difference. Sabko pata hai. India, China also. India, China, thinking of China as an enemy comes easier to us. But when you start teaching something like a SAARC, it requires a certain degree of abstract level of thinking, right? So that is basically what has marked the progress at SAARC. A certain top-down approach, lack of a South Asian brand or South Asian identity, or participation of people in this process of integration, right? So Europe also has various nationalities. Europe is much common to India, much like India. In what sense? You have various ethnicities, languages in Europe, right? But there is also a sense of being Europeans which has been brought about by A, crisis, B, a certain emphasis on certain civilizational basis, right? For example, sometimes you can say that civilizational roots of US or Europe is a certain Judeo-Christian civilizational basis or civilizational emphasis, or looking at development of political thought in Europe from the ancient classical period. So Plato, Aristotle are common, same for them, right? In South Asia, do we have such common figures emphasized upon commonly? जैसे अपने देश से नहीं, दूसरे देश से बताइए, दूसरे देश के किस फिगर को आप मानते हैं कि वो इन्फ्लुएंशियल है आपके जीवन में, आपके सोच को शेप करने में? बताइए. हाँ, नहीं, आप अगर इफ यू रेज योर हैंड्स इट वुड बी इजियर फॉर मी टू. कोई नहीं है ऐसा? बुद्धा. So you don't think Buddha was from India? No, he was from Nepal. Right, Buddha is the correct example because at that point in time you don't have this distinct conception of sovereign countries. There may be a cultural awareness of the land which can be called Bharatvarsh or Jambu Dweep, right? But generally transport is not as efficient. Generally geography is still difficult. So people have their own distinct identities. But look at Buddha, what did he do? Why? Why he can be a common figure of identity? In his own life, he left the place of his birth. He roamed around the subcontinent. So basically, his story, his imprint is in different parts of the subcontinent. In his life and after that also, when his followers spread out. So Buddha is one figure, right? But I was thinking of in much more modern sense. Much more modern sense. Are there any political leaders from your surrounding that you like? Nahin? You like Mao Zedong? South Asia से भी नहीं है. Plus not such an ideal personality to mention first. Interview में मत करना. Interview में there are a lot of questions where open-ended questions are thrown at you to just test what choices would you make. So Mao Zedong, certainly because he advocated violence, number one, right? Secondly, not from South Asia. So a few days back, Nelson Mandela is from South Africa, sir. From South Africa. But Nelson Mandela is among the few foreigners who have been awarded the Bharat Ratna. Can you think of Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan? Have you heard of him? He became a Pakistani, but do you know anything about him? He opposed the partition, he did not want that, right? A few days back, Sri Lanka's president gave a interview and he paid rich tributes to Jawaharlal Nehru. Not much like these days in his own country, but the neighboring country paid tribute to him. So that is what we are talking about. If you can have awareness about Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, if they can have awareness about Mr. Nehru or any particular political leader that you like, including our current Prime Minister, right? Or you can think of somebody like a Bhagat Singh, right? A Bhagat Singh. Bhagat Singh should be equally celebrated in India and in Pakistan, right? Or if you can think of how Manmohan Singh, Dr. Manmohan Singh, India's Prime Minister, was born in Pakistan. So common identities you can think of, common personalities you can think of. Sri Rabindranath Tagore writing the national anthem of India and Bangladesh, or Qazi Nazrul Islam being quite popular on both sides of the border as a poet, right? So it's only a matter of thinking, imagining, pushing your imagination, and is umar mein don't get rigid, don't become simple followers of things. You have a long life, you may find a lot of interesting things in life if you don't allow your imagination to get closed. But imagination generally is not playing at that level of regional integration, so our leaders have not been that imaginative, right? So there has been a lack of South Asian identity. What else? Domestic, since there is a focus on sovereignty, internal issues, domestic political transitions, that is another reason. That is another reason for regional non-cooperation or lack of cooperation in the region. That countries don't have the bandwidth. You are thinking too much about yourself. Sometimes we become myopic in life. We are thinking too much about ourselves. We are thinking too much about what my problems in the examination are. And we forget to assess ourselves in a comparative perspective, that what my problems are may be the problems of other people also, right? So the moment you become inward looking, myopic, what happens is you start losing the sense of world, what is happening, sense of proportion. So that is basically what has been the case with South Asian countries. They are too much involved in their domestic problems. तो bandwidth बचता ही नहीं है वो across border cooperation के बारे में सोचने के लिए. Domestic transitions. So that has been the history of South Asia. Pakistan, military democracy, military democracy. Nepal, monarchy, Maoism, democracy, within democracy also now constitution. Sri Lanka, internal civil war, insurgencies, now economic and political crisis. Bangladesh, military, civilian rule, contention between BNP and Awami League, right? Maldives, India out, India in, right? Or basically constitution, and then after that tussle for power. Mohammad Nasheed out, right? Abdullah Yamin in, and then Mr. Ibrahim Soli is the president, but now again political campaign. So our politics generally is competitive in nature, sometimes divisive in nature also. So when we look at this at the larger level, most of these countries have been facing their own domestic problems, so they don't have the capacity to think in terms of commonalities. इसीलिए मैंने शुरुआत में ही आपको यूरोप का एग्जांपल दे दिया था, that don't feel bad that we in South Asia are not able to do it. Don't ever think that we in India would be able to do everything on our own. We would need cooperation, but cooperation happens in a context. Europeans became integrated only after years of war. So that is basically the context, but when we are talking about specific situation, we can list these issues, right? And then next thing, what is it that we need to do? We need to find the solutions, suggest the solutions. So once you have identified the problems, फिर से वही कह रहा हूं, मैं वही बात दोहरा रहा हूं, जब मैं यहाँ पे लिखने जा रहा हूं, आप पीछे से कहेंगे, आप बिल्कुल हाथ उठा करके सवाल पूछ सकते हैं, राइट? सॉल्यूशंस के बारे में सोचते हैं. हाँ, अब आप क्या कह रहे थे? कर सकते हैं, बिल्कुल कर सकते हैं, मैं आपको गलत नहीं कहूंगा, पर वो कंसर्न एक जगह पे हमने एड्रेस किया था, दैट जब हम कहते हैं कि देयर इज लैक ऑफ trade between these countries, so the example always is that they trade more with China, including India. All right, so you can, but 8 point लिखने के बाद जगह नहीं बच जाती एग्जाम में. All right, so if you remember it in the examination, कुछ चीजें क्या होती है प्रैक्टिकल सिनेरियो में आप करते हैं. जैसे मैं अभी आपको शॉर्टकट नहीं बता सकता, मैं अभी कहूंगा पूरी तरह से मेहनत करो, apply yourself, don't use shortcuts, don't think that answers are going to come easily to you. You will reach to that stage once you follow the process. But in the examination, what would happen? You cannot keep on thinking that, oh, my teacher had told me to do this, so I would only follow this process. Any teacher that you like, anyone that you like, they may have told you a method. But in the examination, dear friends, you are the one who are doing it. So in a practical scenario, whatever जो भी reasonable चीज आपके दिमाग में आती है, वो point बन सकती है. तो उस context में मैं आपको कह रहा हूँ कि आप सही हैं, right? But ये 7-8 पॉइंट लिख लेते हैं, राइट? ओके, तो उस सिचुएशन में आप कर सकते हैं. सो वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट द सॉल्यूशन. सो व्हाट आर द सॉल्यूशन? वंस यू हैव आइडेंटिफाइड द लिस्ट ऑफ प्रॉब्लम्स, सॉल्यूशन बिकम्स इजी. इट डज नॉट मीन दैट यू हैव टू सॉल्व एवरीथिंग. यू हैव टू सजेस्ट अ फ्रेमवर्क ऑफ द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट factors through which progress can be achieved. There you understand there are few things about which we cannot do anything. So then you focus on the doable first. What can be addressed? Don't ever think that you would be able to solve all the problems. So just tell me, what are the solutions? Creating South Asian brand. What else? More frequent meetings and summits. What else? More bilateral ties. What else? What else? Structural reforms. तो आप समझ पा रहे हैं, कोरिलेट कर पा रहे हैं. फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, फॉर साउथ एशिया टू वर्क under the umbrella of SAARC towards regional integration, what is required is structural reforms at SAARC, right? So structural reforms at SAARC. For example, moving towards a weighted formula of decision making, which means unanimity gives too much of power or influence to one country over the decisions of other countries. So you have weighted formula. Either you can have a majority does not look good everywhere, so you can have conditions like for any decision to be blocked, at least 2 members should be supporting it, or at least 3 members should be supporting it. That is basically one way of saying weighted formula of decision making, right? Make it difficult to block, make it easier to cooperate or make progress. So that is something that we can think of. That is something that is required. Structural reforms can also mean strengthening the secretariat, strengthening the manpower at the secretariat, strengthening professional capability of the secretariat. There is a theory in international relations called functionalism. Functionalism says regional integration happens when you separate technical and economic functions from political and social functions. So technocrats cooperating together would ensure that there is progress, and when that progress happens, then other areas can also be taken up. So that is a functional approach, that you strengthen technical areas. So strengthening of the secretariat, technical capabilities of the secretariat. What else? you can think of focusing on connectivity, and infrastructure in a regional framework or in a bilateral framework. So bilateral projects and regional projects. Either it happens bilaterally, so each country gets connected to each other. That would also connect South Asia, or you have regional projects. So what the example of regional projects would be BBIN, all right, at the sub-regional level. Projects like BBIN, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, right? Or in some areas there is already an agreement. So, for example, SAARC Energy Agreement, signed in 2014 already gives the mandate to these countries to develop a regional electricity market with grid connectivity, right? So these provisions are already there, making progress on them should not be difficult. So suppose India and Pakistan have problems, but India and Nepal don't have problem, India and Bangladesh don't have a problem, India and Bhutan don't have a problem, right? Afghanistan is a different story. So making progress in this is possible. We can say it is possible. In some parts of South Asia, agreements are there. What else can be done? Cultivating a South Asian brand or identity. In what sense? In the context of the world, rest of the world, we can think of ourselves as South Asia. दुनिया के बारे में जब बात करें तो we can think of ourselves as South Asia. Just as Russia says, we have our own sphere of influence, don't include Ukraine as part of NATO. So every country has a sense of the region that it is located in. When it is talking to the world, it is saying that this is my region. ASEAN countries come together when it comes to dealing with the rest of the world. Europe comes together when it comes to dealing with the rest of the world. So it is possible. Thinking of common interest, how we can cooperate. So building of a South Asian brand. That means developing, that simply means developing integrated regional supply chains, right? How can it happen? Bangladesh is mainly known for ready-made apparels, right? India produces cotton, India produces yarn. So that these are the raw material for ready-made apparel. Bangladesh can continue knitting ready-made apparel. It does not need to grow its own cotton or make its own yarn. And then they can export their ready-made apparel to India. We have FDI in multi-brand retail stores. We have a common market that we are trying to create through the implementation of GST. So that can be a complete value chain, integrated supply chain, right? We continue manufacturing what we are doing, but we can look at ourselves as sources of supply, and we can look at ourselves as markets for each other, and then India can export Bangladeshi products. For example, ye jitne bhi Tommy Hilfiger, all these high and mighty brands ultimately are based on cheap labor, child labor in Bangladesh, है ना? हम किसी से कम है क्या? So we can create a South Asian brand by thinking of integration, right? Bangladesh can export to India, Indian exporters can export to the rest of the world. That can be one channel, right? Bangladesh can keep on exporting to the rest of the world also. But from the raw material to the intermediate goods to retail, we can think of a supply chain, right? So developing an integrated regional supply chain is one, and promoting cultural engagements between people, right? So generally there is cultural engagement, but we are not aware, right? South Asia Festival of Culture takes place. SAF Games take place. How many of you are aware of SAF Games? South Asian Federation Games? नहीं aware है? There are matches between India and Bangladesh, India and Afghanistan, football matches. SAF Games होते हैं, but you are aware of Commonwealth Games, है ना? क्यों? क्योंकि टीवी में आपने वही देखा है. So there are SAF Games. So that is basically one way of promoting the commonality between these sides, interaction between people. देखो होता है ये, it is easier for a sports person to praise the other. जैसे चोपड़ा साहब अपने पाकिस्तानी कॉम्पिटिटर की बुराई नहीं करते, भले ही सोशल मीडिया में जो भी चल रहा हो, राइट? कौन से चोपड़ा साहब? मिस्टर नीरज चोपड़ा विनिंग गोल्ड फॉर इंडिया, right? He was not at the Commonwealth game, so the gentleman from Pakistan won the gold. उन्होंने भी तारीफ की नीरज चोपड़ा साहब की, wished him well. Mr. Chopra also wishes well. Similarly, Commonwealth के अंदर बहुत सारे ऐसे मैचेस हुए जिसमें इंडिया पाकिस्तान खेल रहे थे. For example, we won a gold defeating a Pakistani wrestler. So there also look at the interview of Pakistani wrestler. He is saying what? That this should happen more. This should happen more. So it is possible is the only thing that I am submitting. Whether you want it or not is your choice. And certainly I don't make the policies, so it's possible. You can do so. Right? It would be difficult for a politician, for example, especially when you are ruling a country, to say good things about your adversary. Because that is the level at which you are operating. But it is easier for an artist, for a sports person to say good things about people from other country. It's possible, is the only thing that I am saying. So when this happens, what would happen? There is a different layer of awareness that is created, and we are hoping, that is what we should hope. We should not hope that there be a war and India defeats this and India defeats that. We should hope that there be no war, because war is costly for everyone. We are not afraid of war, but war extracts its cost. So we should hope that there is a change in awareness. Even Pakistan, the people in Pakistan become aware of their interests in cooperating with India. That is what we hope. So इस hope के साथ ये बात कर रहे हैं, right? With due respect to whatever opinion you hold or anyone holds, right? So that is something that we can do at the level of South Asia to make cooperation at South Asia possible. We cannot do anything about sensitivity on sovereignty. That is an abstract thing, that's a learned thing, historical thing. We cannot do anything about domestic political transition in countries. हम कुछ नहीं कर सकते उसके बारे में. Bilateral contentions को हम नहीं सुधार सकते. That is a function of bilateral relations. SAARC cannot do much about that. So things that you can't address, don't try to think that you would be able to promote it. But you can say certainly improvement in overall bilateral relations would further add to the potential of integration in South Asia, right? So that can be your conclusion. You have now suggested. People think कि अब conclusion में क्या लिखें? Conclusion में लिखने के लिए जरूरी है कि आप सारे पॉइंट्स यहाँ पे खर्च ना कर दें. एक पॉइंट बचाएं प्रोग्रेस का, सॉल्यूशन का, जो आप कंक्लूजन में लिख पाए, राइट? वो जल्दी होती है ना सबको, मैं पूरे पॉइंट्स लिख दूं, सारे पॉइंट्स एग्जामिनर को सब बता दूं. सो दैट इज नॉट द गेम, राइट? दैट इज नॉट द गेम. सो as Sharanveer says, augment the neighborhood first policy. So bring India, that can be your conclusion. So for integration in South Asia to be successful, India has to be the leader and India has to be seen as the engine of growth. Meaning, India has to be part of that lifting tide, that rising tide that lifts every boat. Right? सुना है आपने? A rising tide lifts all boats. When there is a tide which is rising, it does not discriminate between different boats. So that can be one conclusion, that for any meaningful integration in South Asia to take place, for SAARC to function properly, it is necessary that India is in a leading position. Why? Kyun? Because India is 70% of demography, 70% of economy, 70% of geography of South Asia. Demography population ही हो गया भाई. Demography, geography, सब कुछ South Asia का क्या है mostly? India. So India obviously is a natural leader. So you can talk about neighborhood first. So India can contribute to this process through the principles and practices of neighborhood first. एक ये conclusion हो गया. When you can bring in India in any of the questions, even in the optionals, when you are writing, try and bring examples of India as much as possible. दुनिया भर के बारे में आप बहुत कुछ जानते होंगे, लेकिन try and bring India. Other thing that you can do is you can think of the current scenario. So you can say that the post-COVID world offers an opportunity for South Asian countries to realize that only by collective efforts they are able to solve problems or challenges, emerging challenges such as the health and economic effects of the pandemic. So current context, that the post-pandemic period is an opportunity for South Asian countries to realize that the emerging challenges like climate change or pandemics like COVID can only be dealt with collectively, meaning realizing that there are certain areas in which collective action is required. So post-pandemic world is an opportunity for South Asian countries to realize that only collective efforts would enable them to deal with emerging issues, emerging problems like climate change or a pandemic like COVID-19. That is something that you should think of. So first suggestion brings India as a solution. Second suggestion brings the current context and it is future oriented, right? So that should be the nature of conclusion as I am trying to suggest to you. I am not saying that this is the best conclusion that is there. The best conclusion would only come when you know what is your best, right? That best conclusion cannot be dictated by a teacher. It would come from you. You should know what your abilities are, and then depending on that, I am giving you the direction. Either bring India, neighborhood first, India as a leader, or bring the current context. But also remember the reality that 2020 had opened up the possibility. Leaders meeting on COVID-19 was hosted by किसने होस्ट किया था? कोविड-19 के पीरियड के ही लोग हैं ना आप लोग, घर पे काफी रहे पढ़ाई के दौरान. How many of you completed your degrees during the COVID period? So I would not be wrong in calling you COVID generation, right? If you have spent 2 years of your education in college in lockdown, then it means that you missed out on collective learning, right? But what I am saying is, don't forget what had happened in the period in which you were at your prime. So COVID-19 leaders meeting was hosted by India virtually. इंडिया ने एक मीटिंग होस्ट की थी. भूल गए? मार्च का लॉकडाउन याद है? ताली बजाना याद है? मैं हंसने के लिए नहीं कह रहा. दीज वर द एफर्ट्स विच आर बीइंग. तो कुछ चीजें आपको याद रहती, कुछ चीजें याद क्यों नहीं रहती हैं? वो यही बता रहा है कि आप हमारी लाइफ में हमारी प्रायोरिटीज होती हैं. सो India had made efforts. So when you are preparing for UPSC, just try and find out what India has done. India had hosted a leaders meeting on COVID-19, emergency meeting. बहुत सारी emergency meetings हुई थी. So here we saw some steps like formation of a COVID emergency fund, right? Or online portal supported by India for capacity building in combating COVID. These were the steps which were taken. So these are the positives that you can think of. But you again think there, the problem of SARC persisted. Pakistan's Prime Minister did not participate. Pakistan's Health Minister participated, and on that occasion also, Pakistan's Health Minister raised the issue of Jammu and Kashmir in the context of COVID-19. So we see that there is hope when there is problem, but we see that there are structural issues with SARC as well. So more meetings can be suggested. Meetings are happening at the level of foreign ministers, at the level of secretaries. But what we see, a summit can't happen unless India-Pakistan relations improve. All right, a summit would not take place unless India-Pakistan relations improve. Right? So we have a COVID example where a emergency meeting of heads of states was hosted, all participated, outcome was agreement on contributing to COVID emergency fund, pooling together resources. India offered that we offer our technical expertise, training, capacity building to healthcare professionals, healthcare providers, and we would collate the information on COVID and put it on a common portal to be accessible to all countries of South Asia. ये हुआ, पर उसके साथ ये भी हुआ that structural issues played out. For example, Pakistan's Prime Minister did not participate. Pakistan's Health Minister participated, so he raised the issue of Jammu and Kashmir, which India then objected to. India criticized Pakistan. So just remember, this is something that happens. So I have brought you up to date. Now when you find a mention of SARC, any meeting related with SARC, just pay attention to that. So we have solved one problem of what? Limitations at SARC, reasons, and how to make SARC effective. ये कर लिया हमने, तो अब दूसरे क्वेश्चन की तरफ चलते हैं, उससे पहले ब्रेक, राइट? Or as I say, in the break, think of your issues, problems, questions. We can take them first thing after the break, right? So after the break, we think of two more questions to move towards the next topic, which is moving towards BIMSTEC, Southeast Asia, right? That is what we'll do. Please settle down. We have come back after the break. If you have any questions, feel free to raise those questions. सवाल है कोई? नहीं? भाई हाँ या ना में जवाब दीजिए, आपस में बात करना बंद कीजिए. So the second question is that in the absence of, we are moving forward in this context, regional integration, in the absence of progress at SARC, in other words we can say in the context of logjam at SARC, right? So in the absence of progress at SARC, what are the options? What are the options available to India for promoting regional integration? Meaning, if SARC is not functioning right now up to its potential, that does not mean that the goal of regional integration is not important, right? So don't conflate SARC and the idea of regional integration. Regional integration is the idea, is the preferred approach. SARC is one vehicle, one way in which it can be done. So if SARC seems to be problematic right now or facing problems right now, what options can be there for India? And this question we have been asking since 2016, since India has not been participating at the summit of SARC. Then what can India do? So since that period, we find that answer to this question has three particular approaches. One is called SARC -1. All right, SARC -1 or SARC minus, which is that one? Pakistan. SARC minus Pakistan. That is one option, that we continue cooperation at SAARC somehow by isolating or ignoring Pakistan, right? Second is other options such as sub-regional cooperation, that it is possible to cooperate with certain countries, right? Sub-regional cooperation, right? That regional integration process, step by step, piece by piece, can continue. And the next option we can call is the trans-regional cooperation, right? So SAARC -1, sub-regional cooperation. The example of sub-regional cooperation is BBIN, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal. Trans-regional cooperation simply is a reference to BIMSTEC. Trans-regional means going beyond the region. So BIMSTEC has both kinds of members, South Asian and Southeast Asian. दोनों जगह से उनके members हैं. तो ये एक ऑप्शन हो गया कि ये ऑप्शंस हमारे पास अवेलेबल हैं. Even when SAARC is not functioning optimally, there are difficulties at SAARC. How can we make progress? So Rashi asks, SAARC be replaced by BIMSTEC. Can SAARC be replaced by BIMSTEC? So it is not a question of replacing SAARC with BIMSTEC. It is a question of where exactly smooth functioning is possible. So SAARC cannot be replaced by BIMSTEC because SAARC is based on a South Asian identity. It is an organization purely of South Asian countries. Secondly, it has a certain degree of institutionalization. Institutions are there. So SAARC would continue to exist. Foreign ministers meetings, secretarial meetings are taking place. But progress at SAARC seems to be difficult. So you don't throw the baby out with the bath water. है ना? You think that SAARC is going to be there. India has also invested in SAARC. SAARC is going to be there, right? But there is a condition where SAARC is just not conducive right now in the current context for maintaining regional integration. So there you may have to think about other options. So when you think about SAARC -1, it fits with the option that India had adopted vis-a-vis Pakistan, that is diplomatic isolation of Pakistan. So it helps in that objective, that it fits with India's aim of diplomatically isolating Pakistan. Then you have the advantage of conveying India's objection to Pakistan's interference and promotion of terrorism. Pakistan's interference and promotion of terrorism. So it would serve two purposes. One, it is in continuation with India's option of diplomatically isolating Pakistan. Another, it is also an option in the context of, so for example, this is an option that mostly was talked about in 2016, when there was immediate issue of how to respond to Pakistan promoted terrorism. So it conveys India's seriousness, that we are serious in dealing with the issue of terrorism. These two advantages are there, but then this cannot be the complete solution, because A, it is technically difficult to achieve, because in order to move SAARC ahead without Pakistan, what would require is consensus with other countries. Other countries should also agree to diplomatically isolate Pakistan. So it is technically difficult, which means simply just understand that for this to happen or this to be effective, you would require cooperation from other countries. Secondly, it would create difficulties in ensuring Afghanistan's integration with South Asia. At that point in time, at least it was still Afghanistan in which India was engaged. But generally, Pakistan is the only member of SAARC which has any effective connectivity with Afghanistan. So it would be difficult in the context of ensuring Afghanistan's integration in South Asia, right? Because Afghanistan is a member of South Asia, but in terms of sharing a border, India has a formal border, but Pakistan effectively is the only country which is connected with Afghanistan. So that would be another difficulty. And the next level of difficulty would be, it would push Pakistan further away from South Asia and in the embrace of China, towards China. So that is another option. So if Pakistan is a member of SAARC, you still have the option of doing what? Saying we would not participate in the summit. Pakistan is keen on hosting this summit. Pakistan का थोड़ा सा तो इंटरेस्ट होगा ना कि समिट हो जाए, होगा समिट हो जाए, पाकिस्तान चाहेगा समिट हो जाए, क्यों? और लोग आएंगे, पाकिस्तान का रिकग्निशन बढ़ेगा, एक्सेप्टेंस बढ़ेगा. तो अभी तो आपके पास एक प्रेशर पॉइंट है कि पाकिस्तान सार्क का मेंबर है, आप पाकिस्तान को कह रहे हो कि जब तक यू डोंट इंप्रूव योर बिहेवियर वी वुड नॉट कोऑपरेट विथ यू. वंस पाकिस्तान इज नॉट अ मेंबर ऑफ सार्क, ये ऑप्शन चला गया ना. पाकिस्तान अगर सार्क का मेंबर नहीं है तो फिर आप ये थोड़ी ना कहोगे उसको कि हम समिट में पार्टिसिपेट नहीं करेंगे. समझ में आ रही है बात? तो दैट्स व्हाई ऑप्शन, सम ऑप्शंस में सीम टू बी अट्रैक्टिव. बहुत ही अट्रैक्टिव नाम है सार्क -1 पाकिस्तान, बट हाउ वुड यू डू इट? what would happen if you do it? What benefits are there? And what are the difficulties in doing it? So that's why, though SAARC -1 seems to be an attractive proposition, it's technically difficult and it also creates difficulties related with integration of Afghanistan with South Asia and pushes Pakistan further away towards China, because Pakistan currently also has only 4% trade with South Asian countries. So then whatever thin connection Pakistan had with South Asia, meaning stake in South Asia, that would not be there. तो अगली बार आप कैसे कहोगे कि हम समिट में पार्टिसिपेट नहीं करते? That leverage would not be there, right? So that's one. Attractive but not so effective. But without directly pursuing this option, it is still possible, and this can be done through promoting those kinds of cooperation where Pakistan is not a part, right? So here we have the idea of sub-regional cooperation. Sub-regional cooperation. So this is possible in terms of geographic contiguity. This is possible in the context of geographic contiguity of some countries in South Asia, and it is possible in the context of it fits in with the objectives and principles of SAARC. So without discarding SAARC altogether, it's possible that you imagine cooperation in other frameworks. So this can happen if you think that some countries are geographically contiguous. So that is where you find that the BBIN framework is an option through which process of regional integration can be continued, right? It does not stop altogether because SAARC is not functioning. So BBIN framework may ensure continuation of regional integration or progress in regional integration, right? So what is the BBIN framework? So BBIN refers to, is an acronym for Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal. What kind of cooperation has been imagined under this? So right now BBIN framework is based on the motor vehicle agreement. The motor vehicle agreement of 2015 between Bangladesh, Bhutan, India and Nepal. So basically one concrete project that is identified with BBIN is BBIN Motor Vehicle Agreement 2015, right? That's the concrete project through which BBIN can be imagined. Implementation of the agreement signed in 2015, BBIN Motor Vehicle Agreement, right? So now these countries are engaged in implementation of BBIN Motor Vehicle Agreement. That's what they are doing, right? So what is this Motor Vehicle Agreement? What is the purpose of it? So the background is simple, that the idea of connectivity was identified as a priority area by SAARC in 2010. All right, in 2010, SAARC identified the decade to be decade of connectivity. So for that, the idea of motor vehicle agreement was to ensure a common framework for seamless movement of vehicles across national borders, seamless movement of cargo and passenger traffic across national border, meaning common rules, so that a truck starting, let's say, from Bangladesh can cross over easily into India and then cross over into Nepal easily and cross over into Bhutan easily, right? So seamless movement of traffic on the basis of common rules. हर जगह RTO होता है, हर जगह आपके systems हैं, हर जगह आपके rules हैं, अलग अलग हैं, standards अलग अलग हैं vehicular traffic के, तो मुश्किल होगा cooperation. So that is something that they had imagined, having a common motor vehicle agreement. So basically harmonizing their rules and provisions on movement of traffic to ensure seamless movement of cargo and passenger traffic across the border. ये purpose था SAARC motor vehicle agreement के पीछे, in continuation with the goal of promoting connectivity in SAARC. But what happened? 2014 SAARC summit, the organization SAARC could not adopt the motor vehicle agreement. क्यों? I have already mentioned it, because Pakistan had reservations regarding this agreement, regarding this connectivity. So then SAARC could not adopt the motor vehicle agreement. भाई मैं धीरे धीरे बोलता हूँ, धीरे धीरे भी आप लिख सकते हैं, बहुत सारे लोग लिख लेते हैं मेन काम की चीजें. दूसरा, कुछ चीजें मैं केवल सोचने के लिए बोलता हूँ कि आप सोचो, ऐसे लिखने के लिए नहीं बोलता हूँ, है ना. When I'm specially giving you a suggestion कि think, imagine, right? I'm only suggesting you. It is not necessary that you write it, but something that I repeat. For example, seamless movement of cargo and passenger traffic, right? तो वो आप लिख सकते हैं. That is the aim. So SAARC MVN could not be adopted. थोड़ा सा मैच्योर भी होना है ना आपको. Adopted in 2014. मतलब अपने इनिशिएटिव पे भी काम कर पाए. ये जरूरी नहीं कि टीचर ही आपको बोले कि आप लिखो, राइट? ये भी आपको करना, अपना इनिशिएटिव भी लेना है, बिकॉज अल्टीमेटली यू वुड बी राइटिंग द एग्जामिनेशन. आप लिखेंगे, आप वहां पे होंगे, तो फिर अभी से अपने भरोसा करना शुरू करो, सोचना शुरू करो क्या सुनना है, क्या लिखना है. ऐसा नहीं है कि मेरे मुंह से या किसी भी व्यक्ति के मुंह से जो भी चीजें निकल रही हैं वो एकदम ब्रह्म ज्ञान है, राइट? यूनिवर्सल नॉलेज है. You can discriminate on what is important, what is not, right? So it could not be adopted. So in 2015, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India and Nepal, as contiguous geographies in eastern sub-region eastern sub-region of South Asia decided to sign and implement the motor vehicle agreement, right? So SAARC could not do it. So these countries in the eastern sub-region of South Asia decided to sign and implement the motor vehicle agreement, right? So what would come out of this motor vehicle agreement? So first of all, the motor vehicle agreement, first of all, is the only concrete proposal under this particular framework. So it would ensure, as I have said, seamless cargo and passenger vehicular movement. That is something that would be ensured, right? That's one thing. That would also require development of infrastructure. So it can be a template, it can aid in the development of infrastructure. So when we are talking about connectivity, we are talking about the software. Software is rules, and hardware. Hardware is concrete infrastructure. You can achieve full. Lokesh asks full form of MVM. MVM नहीं भैया, MVN. I have mentioned it. देखो कहाँ किया है, इससे पहले वाले पेज में भी किया है, तो थोड़ा ध्यान दीजिए. मोटर व्हीकल एग्रीमेंट का मतलब क्या है? MVA. ऑल राइट. सो मोटर व्हीकल एग्रीमेंट कई बार बोला है कि नहीं बोला है मैंने? ओके. MVN मैंने लिख दिया. ओके. MVN लिखा, M नहीं लिखा था. मेरा N और M एक जैसा दिख रहा है, तो ये मेरी गलती है. MVA, मोटर व्हीकल एग्रीमेंट. चलिए. सो व्हाट वुड हैपन? इट वुड क्रिएट कॉमन रूल्स. इट कैन ऑल्सो एड इन द डेवलपमेंट ऑफ इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर. ये होगा. ये तो सिंपल चीज आपको समझ में आ गई. ये इमीडिएटली हो सकता है. इसके अलावा द MVA is working on the basis of joint working groups. So countries have created for the implementation of motor vehicle agreement joint working groups, meaning officials interact with each other. Officials interact with each other, right? And do what? They are discussing modalities of cooperation. So joint working group, meaning relevant ministries and their officials are involved under the guidance of Ministry of External Affairs. So this is on the issues of connectivity and infrastructure. One, that is a clear area where cooperation is being sought. Another is on water power cooperation, meaning cooperation in water resources and power. So these are the two joint working groups which have been created. That what can happen under BBIN. Looking at the geography of this region, what can happen is that these countries can develop infrastructure, these countries can develop trade, these countries can develop common rules, these countries can develop cooperation even in water resources, because now see, India and Bangladesh, India and Nepal, India, Bhutan share what else? Water, transboundary rivers. So that means hydropower projects can be jointly implemented. That means grid connectivity can happen. That means regional power markets can be created. So that's the possibility within the MVN. We have started with implementation of one agreement, and we have started interacting for the implementation of agreement through joint working group on connectivity and infrastructure, and also on power, water and power. So these are the areas of cooperation which are possible. So that's where we see that implementation of the motor vehicle agreement of 2015 would ensure what? How would it be beneficial? So first of all, it would create efficiency in trade. It would create efficiency in trade. So for example, many sources say that India's trade with South Asia, India's trade with South Asia can increase through this implementation by 30% and by 60%, and with rest of the world by 30%, right? So this would aid trade by creating common standards, common infrastructure, promoting seamless vehicular movement. It would promote trade. It would create trade efficiency. It would increase India's trade with South Asia by 60%, and it would increase India's trade with rest of the world by 30%. That is what some people say, right? So for example, World Bank says that BBIN can emerge as the growth pole in South Asia. Why is the World Bank saying that? World Bank is saying that on the basis of the potential of the motor vehicle agreement, if it is implemented. So that's another way in which this can be talked about, right? Now, we can also think in terms of, we had talked about it in India-Bangladesh relations, that it is argued that in real income in India, with the implementation of these kinds of connectivity project, can go up by 7% and around 16 to 18% in Bangladesh, that can go up, right? So that is the meaning of it. This would create transport and connectivity efficiency. Transport and connectivity efficiency. For whom? For these countries as a whole, but also for India's northeastern states. This can create connectivity efficiency, efficient transport, efficient transit for northeastern states. Because where would we develop? Where is exactly BBIN? In the eastern part of South Asia. Which states are bordered by these countries? Either Nepal or Bhutan or Bangladesh or India to hai na, northeastern states, right? If we can promote connectivity here, roads would be built. India में जो हम road बनाएंगे, वो भी इस काम में आएगा. कोई नया BBIN road तो बनाएंगे नहीं, right? We would improve existing infrastructure, connect it. So trade and transport efficiency for northeastern states, meaning economic opportunities would improve there. It is also argued that this is the template on the basis of which connectivity corridors can be translated into or transformed into economic corridors. Connectivity corridors can be transformed into economic corridors, which means what? It would lead to increase in investments, increase in industrialization, that can happen, right? So connectivity corridor, it is argued, can be transformed into economic corridor. Once this is successful, once we have implemented, what would happen? It would promote economic activity, investment may increase, industrialization may increase. कैसे? जब भी आपके इलाके में कोई रोड बनता है तो क्या होता है? Do you foresee an uptick in economic activity if the government proposes a highway or proposes a railway in your area? What happens? Property prices go up. पहला, जिनके पास जमीन है उनको बहुत फायदा होता है. Look at Delhi NCR region, right? People moving around in expensive vehicles because they have realized increased prices for their land as infrastructure and connectivity has increased. In any area also, village, tier 2 cities, infrastructure improves, property prices go up. Then what happens? Every industry ultimately is based on locational factors, है ना? Barring some industries, which are called footloose industries. Footloose industries are not based on location. Location, resource are not the constraints for footloose industry. But most of the industry would ultimately look at certain location factor. What are the location factors? What are the resources nearby? Right? Skilled workforce nearby. But mostly resources. But most importantly, infrastructure. Once you produce something, how would you transport it? Right? So that's why coastal areas seem to be more developed. Because of port-led development, because most of the production, if it is being exported, it is being exported through the ports. तो वहां तक तो पहुंच ही रहा है. तो generally that is what happens. Somebody who would open a dhaba, a highway comes up, somebody opens a dhaba. That increases employment, right? So that's a simple idea. SEZs, special economic zones, may come up, है ना? So infrastructure is always considered to be a force multiplier in the economy. Investment in infrastructure translates into multiple gains. Employment increase, productivity increase, so on and so forth. So that is something that would happen. Connectivity corridors can be transformed into economic corridors. What else can happen? So then when this happens, it would improve people to people ties, meaning if there is better connectivity, more bus service between India and Nepal, more bus service between India and Bangladesh, what would happen? बहुत सारे लोग आजकल ब्लॉग बना भी रहे हैं, right? Content creation is fashionable, so a lot of people you would see are making blogs on Myanmar. कोई Indian Myanmar में है, कोई बांग्लादेश में है. People are showing you borders of India, Myanmar, India, Bangladesh. हो रहा है ऐसा? So when it becomes easier, many people can go, you can go. समय निकाल के आप भी जा सकते हैं, आपका समय बचेगा, right? अभी तो वो लोग जा रहे हैं जिनके पास समय है, खाली समय है. कल आप भी जा सकते हैं, सारे लोग जा सकते हैं. So potentially what we would say, familiarity would increase. They can come to India. So people to people ties would improve. This would do what? So this means success of BBIN would signal a shift in South Asia moving away from reservations about integration to an era of trust, right? Once you make this project successful, जो कह रहे हैं वो हो जाए, रियल इनकम्स बढ़ने लगे, ट्रेड बढ़ने लगे, तो इसका मतलब क्या है? लोगों को अपने आप फायदा नजर आने लगेगा. इसका मतलब क्या है? देन देयर वुड बी एन इंसेंटिव कि ऐसा और करना चाहिए. एक बार आपने ये कर लिया तो क्या होगा? ऐसा और करना चाहिए. इसका मतलब क्या होगा? देन वी वुड ग्रेजुअली सी दैट अर्लियर वी न्यू साउथ एशिया बिकॉज कंट्रीज वर ईदर इनवर्ड लुकिंग, डोमेस्टिक फोकस था उनका, सो दे डिड नॉट हैव opportunity for focusing outside. Now we can, or they had distrust in their relations. Now when we implement this becomes an example that it is possible. ये हो सकता है. आज तो सोचते हो तो यही लगता है ना, नहीं हो सकता है. People moving across borders, easier movement across borders. So आज सोचते नहीं लगता अगर ये सक्सेसफुल हो जाए, और सक्सेसफुल होने के चांसेस हैं क्योंकि there is an agreement there. The governments want to do it. So then it would make a shift in South Asia. It would be a visible shift in South Asia towards more trust, towards a greater emphasis on regional cooperation. ऐसे ही दुनिया भर में होता है. So if you can make this successful, and in that sense it would also strengthen, it would also in the future strengthen the objectives of SAARC. right? So tomorrow it can happen that perhaps maybe, as or language बहुत important है, maybe कह रहा हूं मैं, right? It should not be translated into कि ऐसा ही होगा. Maybe in the future Pakistan also realizes the benefits of cooperation. Maybe BBIN makes SARC a relevant vehicle again because it fits into the objectives of SARC. Regional cooperation. It allows for countries taking up their own projects. It basically focuses on connectivity, improving people-to-people ties, improving trade. तो अल्टीमेटली सार्क के ऑब्जेक्टिव्स भी पूरे हो रहे हैं इससे, है ना? सो दिस कैन बी अ फॉर्मूला फॉर सक्सेस. बट फॉर दिस टू हैपन, व्हाट आर द चैलेंजेस दैट नीड टू बी एड्रेस्ड? राइट, फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, the bilateral contention on issues of border. प्रॉब्लम क्या क्या आती है इसमें? सो इश्यूज ऑफ बॉर्डर एंड वाटर नीड टू बी एड्रेस्ड फॉर प्रोग्रेस टू बी मेड एट BBIN. मतलब कभी नेपाल के साथ बॉर्डर इशू है, हो सकता है विद बांग्लादेश देयर इज अ सेंसिटिविटी ऑन बॉर्डर, सो देयर इज ऑलवेज अ पॉसिबिलिटी दैट bilateral issues may prevent progress on BBIN, right? So there is a need to address this issue. This is a challenge. Bilateral contention on issues of border and water needs to be addressed as priorities. So bilaterally भी जो कर रहे हैं, border तो bilaterally ही सुलझाओगे ना, border BBIN में नहीं सुलझा सकते. So there are certain issues that need to be taken care of. मतलब अगर कोई पूछे क्या प्रॉब्लम है, चैलेंज क्या आएगा BBIN को इंप्लीमेंट करने में, बोलो बाइलैटरल बॉर्डर इश्यूज हैं और बाइलैटरल वाटर इश्यूज है. सॉल्यूशन क्या है? दिस नीड्स टू बी एड्रेस्ड एट बाइलैटरल लेवल्स. और क्या हमने बॉर्डर और वाटर के जो इश्यूज हैं उनको अलग रिलेशंस में बात की है, कैसे सॉल्व करते हैं, है ना? तो वो समझ के साथ, कन्विक्शन के साथ ये लिख सकते हो, बिना डरे हुए कि कैसे होगा मुझे तो पता ही नहीं है. फिर कोई पूछता है, मान लो क्रॉस क्वेश्चनिंग हमेशा इंटरव्यू में होती है, कुछ बोलोगे, मेंस एग्जाम में नहीं होगा. मेंस एग्जाम में ये लिख सकते हो, बट अगर फिर भी कोई पूछता है तो बता सकते हो व्हाट इज द प्रोसेस बिटवीन इंडिया एंड नेपाल, व्हाट हैज हैपेंड बिटवीन इंडिया एंड बांग्लादेश. पर इस पर नजर रखना जरूरी है. सेकेंडली, सिक्योरिटी कंसिडरेशंस नीड टू बी factored in adequately. ऐसा होना चाहिए. So northeastern states are facing insurgency. There are social issues in this part of the world, right? Other countries may also have their own security concerns. Countries generally in their relation with each other have security concerns. That if we allow this, then would it be misused for drug trafficking or arms trafficking? So that is something that we don't ignore. Governments, when they are negotiating on these factors also. But you can identify this factor, right? Security considerations need to be factored in. Security issues क्या है इस region में, क्या हमने बात की है in different relations? बात की है. So you are aware of it. So you can identify it as a problem. Challenge है, इसको address करने की जरूरत है. And again, security issues can only be addressed at the bilateral level. So कुछ चीजें bilaterally हमको करनी है, right? And we need to create, there is a urgent need to create adequate institutional arrangements for implementation, right? Adequate institutional arrangements for implementation. ऐसा करने की जरूरत है. So for example, why BBIN was recently in news? Current affairs तो पढ़ते हैं आप? Month of May, current affairs पढ़ा? कई बार मैं भी क्लास ले रहा होता हूँ, कैमरे के सामने अकेला खड़ा होकर के, ऑलराइट, ऑनलाइन लोगों को पढ़ा रहा, तो कई बार मुझे लग रहा है कि मैं कितनी चीज़ें दोहरा रहा हूँ, यहाँ भी बोलना है वहाँ भी बोलना है, तो मेरे लिए भी मुश्किल होता है. पर भाई या तो वीडियो के साथ कर लो या फिर अकेले कर लो, डॉक्यूमेंट पढ़ के, जैसे भी कर लो. पर्पस ये करंट अफेयर्स पढ़ते रहो ताकि क्लास में जवाब दे पाओ. BBIN मोटर व्हीकल को लेके क्या हुआ अभी? मंथ ऑफ मे इट वाज इन न्यूज और नॉट? Agreement was signed between Nepal, India and Bangladesh to go ahead with the implementation. So they are now moving towards institutional arrangements, right? Till now they were in discussion phase, joint working groups were there discussing the idea. Now they are creating institutional arrangement for implementation. अब implementation पे ध्यान देंगे. इसका मतलब बहुत सारा चीज होता है. You can create a special purpose vehicle, right? The BBIN authority or something. ऐसा कर सकते हैं, एक सेपरेट एजेंसी बना दें इंप्लीमेंटेशन के लिए. इस ये है इंस्टीट्यूशनल अरेंजमेंट्स का मतलब. तो जनरली न्यूज साइकिल पे नजर रखो. तो ये करने की हमको जरूरत है इसको इंप्लीमेंट करने के लिए. जनरली वी सी दैट this agreement has been signed by these countries, right? But only ratified by these countries. So we have in principle agreement between Bangladesh, Bhutan, India and Nepal. But right now Bhutan has not ratified the agreement. Bhutan has not ratified this particular agreement. Bhutan still is out of this agreement in terms of implementation. Bhutan has not said no. Bhutan's parliament discussed this issue. They have reservations regarding environmental considerations. They have reservation regarding the impact of increased vehicular traffic on their infrastructure. So they have decided that you guys go ahead, we will see, we will watch, and we may join later. So Bhutan has not ratified it. So there is a need to bring Bhutan into the implementation process also, right? So then we understand that India has allocated more than $1 billion for infrastructure improvement in the context of BBIN. For example, in the bordering areas in northeast, जो भी road हम बनाएंगे, that would be helpful in implementation of BBIN, right? We also see that ADB, Asian Development Bank, is providing 50% of the financial and technical assistance is being provided by ADB, Asian Development Bank. Similarly, World Bank is also interested in supporting this particular agreement. So World Bank has announced a support of $1 billion. World Bank has announced a support of $1 billion to Nepal and Bangladesh to improve their trade infrastructure. So World Bank announces $1 billion to support Nepal and Bangladesh's trade infrastructure. बोल भी रहा हूं ना, कई लोग बोर्ड पे ही देखते रहते हैं कि बोर्ड पे स्पेशल क्या लिखा हुआ है. बोल रहा हूं मैं, वो भी सुन लो आप. क्या हुआ है? $1 billion India has allocated for infrastructure projects. That generally means जो भी हम अंदर रोड बना रहे हैं. ADB provides financial and technical assistance or support to this project. So that also ensures that this project can be successful. And now World Bank is also interested. It has constituted studies and it has recently announced support of around $1 billion to Nepal and Bangladesh to improve their trade infrastructure. So that is how we see that this kind of cooperation is being prioritized. It may soon become a reality, at least we hope so, right? It may. Bhutan, Akshay Nimbalkar says Bhutan has opted out. Bhutan has not opted out. It has not ratified the agreement. As yet, it is not part of the implementation process. It has signed the agreement. In principle, agrees. It may become a part in the future in implementation. Right now, it is not participating in the implementation, right? So that's basically, you should understand, that is what is happening. That's what makes this project feasible. There is within the ADB a project window which is called SASEC, South Asia Sub-Regional Economic Cooperation. I am repeating it again. South Asia Sub-Regional Economic Cooperation. So this is a project finance window under the ADB. So ADB is the secretariat of SASEC. So SASEC is the project finance window.
which would be providing a support to this project, South Asia Sub-Regional Economic Cooperation. SASEC has existed since 2001 and it has supported project implementation, finance project implementation in this region, in countries like Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, Maldives, Sri Lanka, but also Myanmar, right? So, which countries come under the purview of SASEC? Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Maldives and Myanmar, BBIN, MMS, right? These countries जनरली कोऑपरेट, बहुत सारी तरीके से कोऑपरेट करते हैं. आपको ये जानने की जरूरत है कि ये भी एक फॉर्म ऑफ कोऑपरेशन है. सासेक एक विंडो है एडीबी के अंदर, प्रोजेक्ट फाइनेंस करता है किन कंट्रीज में? बीबीआईएन, मतलब ये केवल शॉर्ट फॉर्म बना रहे हैं, इसका मतलब नहीं कि केवल इसके लिए बना है, राइट? एमएमएस. सो दीज आर द कंट्रीज which cooperate on project implementation under the SASEC umbrella of ADB. केवल प्रीलिम्स के लिए ये इंफॉर्मेशन इंपॉर्टेंट हो सकती है, राइट? अगर पूछ ले सासेक के बारे में कुछ तो, राइट? व्हाट इज सासेक? सासेक इज अ पार्ट ऑफ ADB, एशियन डेवलपमेंट बैंक, and it is a project finance facility in which countries? Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal and Myanmar, Maldives, Sri Lanka, right? When was it created? 2001. तो ये सिंपली इसके कॉन्टेक्स्ट में बस मेंशन कर दिया, बाकी मेन कंटेंट ये था. अब क्या बचता है? अब तीसरा ऑप्शन, विच इज व्हाट? ट्रांस रीजनल. केवल नाम देने के लिए दे रहे हैं इसको ट्रांस रीजनल, ताकि एक दिमाग में रहे. ट्रांस रीजनल, गोइंग बियॉन्ड रीजन्स. केवल एक रीजन की बात नहीं है, दो रीजन साथ में आ रहे हैं इसमें. दिस इज एन ऑप्शन दैट इंडिया currently is pursuing. BIMSTEC. So this seems to be the preferred option right now along with BBIN, right? So what is BIMSTEC? So first of all, BIMSTEC is a regional grouping which came into existence in 1997 through what is called the Bangkok Declaration, which was the founding document of the BIMSTEC countries, right? BIMSTEC organization. Where is it headquartered? So its secretariat is located in Dhaka. So it came up in 2014. And who are the members of BIMSTEC? Who are the members of BIMSTEC? Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, plus Myanmar, Thailand and Sri Lanka, right? These are the members of BIMSTEC. Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, Myanmar, Thailand, Sri Lanka. So that's why Bay of Bengal is called an organization of Bay of Bengal Littoral. Bay of Bengal मैं short लिख रहा हूँ, आप full लिख सकते हैं. Bay of Bengal Littoral and adjacent countries, right? That is what BIMSTEC is. BIMSTEC is a regional grouping involving 7 countries which are Bay of Bengal littoral, either on the coast of Bay of Bengal or adjacent, meaning countries which are adjacent to coastal countries, meaning countries, in other words, which use Bay of Bengal as their primary access to ocean. For example, Bhutan or Nepal, they are not on the coast of Bay of Bengal, but they are adjacent. So Bay of Bengal littoral and adjacent countries. It's a regional organization of 7 Bay of Bengal adjacent and littoral countries. So as the name suggests, the purpose was to increase cooperation in the region called Bay of Bengal. So it is imagining a new region or new regional identity on the basis of a shared geography. What is that shared geography? Bay of Bengal. That these countries are connected by, bridged by Bay of Bengal. So this is a new conceptualization that happened, right? So if you look at this particular region, you find that it has around 1.7 billion people, So demographically a significant region. The total GDP, combined GDP of these countries, according to different estimates, is around 4.5 trillion US dollars. So that makes it significant. क्या है इन ये अगर साथ में आ जाए तो what are they bringing together? They are bringing together 1.7 billion people, and they are bringing together economies which constitute 4.5 trillion US dollars in terms of size. So that's why the organization then is based on the potential. What is the potential? Why can we say that this organization can potentially be a preferred vehicle for India? Because of certain factors. A, contiguous geography, meaning if you look at this region, you will find that these countries are located in a contiguous geography, right? So it would not be difficult for you to imagine India, Bhutan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and then start looking at Myanmar, Thailand. एक ही लैंड मास का पार्ट है ना? So, and if we are imagining Sri Lanka to be a part of it, so Sri Lanka has a Bay of Bengal coast. So that's where you find contiguous geography. Mainly we are talking about on the land. If you look at India to Southeast Asia, start with India, go to Vietnam. Till Vietnam, it is the same land mass, right? So you can think that contiguous geography. So that is one potential. Second potential is the economic dynamism. Economic dynamism of the countries, right? That means economically dynamic region. That this is an economically dynamic region. And that is a claim that can be made only on the basis of the fact that India has shown significant growth rate, right, in the recent past, at least in the period since the BIMSTEC was formed. Bangladesh, not again we are talking about the current scenario, but the long-term trend, Bangladesh also has grown. Thailand was also an economy which showed or promised significant growth. So these are significant economies which have grown at a fast pace, relatively fast pace. थोड़ा भी अगर आपको इस रीजन के बारे में पता है तो. So these economies, and then you see the number. This is an economically dynamic region. Number one, size of economy or the growth rate. Second, the Bay of Bengal region itself is right in the middle of east-west trade. So any trade which is moving from Indian Ocean to the Pacific Ocean would pass through Bay of Bengal. So that is also part of its economic dynamism, that the trade that passes through Bay of Bengal is also increasing, right? So for example, more than 50% of India's trade is via or towards the east. तो ईस्ट में जो भी ट्रेड जा रहा है इंडिया का वो जाएगा ना बे ऑफ बंगाल बेसिन से, है ना? So basically that is another reason why we can say that this is an economically dynamic region, economic dynamism. Then we can say another potential of BIMSTEC countries is a lack of major political contention, that इनके बीच में कोई इंडिया पाकिस्तान जैसा झगड़ा नहीं है. दैट इज द सिंपल मीनिंग, राइट? डोंट गो टू लिटरल. लैक ऑफ अ मेजर, छोटे मोटे झगड़े होते रहते हैं, होंगे, डिफरेंसेस होंगे, बट लैक ऑफ मेजर पॉलिटिकल contention among these countries. So that means we can imagine the possibility of cooperation easily among these countries on the basis of geographic contiguity, on the basis of economic dynamism in a shared region, and on the basis of lack of major political contention, right? So that is something that is not there at SAARC, right? These things. SAARC has political contention, bilateral, India, Pakistan. contiguous geography is there, but if you see, India shares borders with all the countries in SAARC, but you don't see Pakistan and Nepal sharing a border, right? So that is basically something that differentiates BIMSTEC region from SAARC. Now, how can it serve India's purpose? So first of all, we can see clearly that BIMSTEC, Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation, is helpful in promoting India's interests, promoting India's neighborhood first, India's neighborhood first, as well as the Act East policies, the Act East policy. So when we look at India's foreign policy, BIMSTEC's potential is in the fact that it can be important for neighborhood first because our neighbors are there, and it can be important in the context of Act East because Southeast Asian countries Myanmar and Thailand are there. So two policies are served by this organization. So in geographic terms, BIMSTEC is a bridge because Bay of Bengal is a bridge between South and Southeast Asia, South and Southeast Asia. It's a bridge. It brings together South and Southeast Asia. So that's why it serves this particular purpose. That is its significance. Now we can also say that it is an important component. It is an important component in India's approach towards the IOR, Indian Ocean region, and its emerging Indo-Pacific approach. So if India is thinking about its foreign policy, it is thinking about neighborhood first, it is thinking about Act East, but it is also thinking about larger Indian Ocean region, and Bay of Bengal is a part of Indian Ocean. So cooperation in Indian Ocean is also enhanced if there is cooperation in any part of Indian Ocean. So BIMSTEC is important in the context of India's consideration of cooperation in IOR, and now we are thinking of cooperation in a combined region of Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean called the Indo-Pacific. So India is developing an Indo-Pacific approach. So even in that context, you can think of BIMSTEC to be an important part, right? So it is thinking of foreign policy as a set of concentric circles, right? So neighborhood, Southeast Asia, Indian Ocean, Indo-Pacific, all can be thought in terms of India's foreign policy. Foreign policy का मतलब कोई एक फिक्स चीज तो हो नहीं गई, तो जितना आप सोच पाओ कि BIMSTEC किस किस चीज में हेल्पफुल हो सकता है, ऑलराइट, किस किस चीज में हेल्पफुल हो सकता है, तो ये आइडिया आपको निकल के आएगा, राइट. नाउ लेट्स मूव फॉरवर्ड. लॉट ऑफ बोरिंग फेसेस, बट काम तो करना पड़ता है ना, बोरिंग काम भी करना पड़ता है, तो थोड़ा सीख लो. So BIMSTEC is useful in this particular context. Now we understand there is another thing, that in recent times the pattern is India is keen to strengthen BIMSTEC, to revive BIMSTEC. That is very visible in recent times, right? So that's also part of the question that we had asked. Why is India keen to revive BIMSTEC? One reason is the potential, another reason how it serves India's foreign policy objectives, another reason is that in the absence of progress at SAARC, BIMSTEC seems to be the ideal vehicle for promoting regional integration. So the evidence is 2016. India hosted a BRICS, BIMSTEC outreach. ऐसा किया इंडिया ने. So you know, I hope you know what is BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, the grouping of these countries. So BRICS summit इंडिया ने होस्ट किया था 2016 में गोवा BRICS summit, and on that occasion India had invited the leaders of BRICS countries and then invited the leader of BIMSTEC countries to interact. Right? जहां पे BRICS summit होता है वहां पे एक outreach program भी होता है. Right? Countries of the region are invited to interact with the leaders of BRICS countries. So India invited whom? Not the leaders of SAARC countries, but the leaders of BIMSTEC countries. So BRICS BIMSTEC outreach. Then what happened? 2018. PM participated, Prime Minister participated in BIMSTEC summit at Kathmandu, right? And on that occasion, that was a signal that India gives significance to BIMSTEC and had proposed strengthening of BIMSTEC, emphasized for the need of strengthening BIMSTEC. So that's also a signal that India at the highest level is calling for strengthening. And in that particular year, India hosted the first military exercise. India hosted the first military exercise of BIMSTEC countries. So India proposed that let's improve cooperation. We can do it by identifying newer ways. India proposed a military exercise and India hosted the military exercise of BIMSTEC in 2018. And then what example can we give? We can also give the example of 2019. 2019 में क्या हुआ? What happened in 2019? So BIMSTEC leaders were invited to the swearing in ceremony of the government after the elections, right? Do you recall this? That BIMSTEC leaders were invited to participate in the swearing in ceremony of the government in 2019. 2014 में क्या हुआ था? SAARC leaders were invited, right? SAARC leaders were invited for swearing in ceremony. So since 2016 we see that in search of an option to promote regional integration, BIMSTEC seems to be the preferred option. India is keen on promoting cooperation at BIMSTEC. We have the evidence in this form. That is what India has done in the recent years, which says that BIMSTEC is going to be important for India. Right? Now, what else can be thought about? We can think then of the need to strengthen BIMSTEC. कैसे strengthen कर सकते हैं BIMSTEC? So by addressing its limitations. So what are the limitations? BIMSTEC has lagged institutionalization. Meaning, Secretariat was only inaugurated in 2014. BIMSTEC was formed in 2012. 1997 में बिम्स्टेक बनता है, 2014 में सेक्रेटेरिएट बनता है, मीनिंग देयर हैज बीन अ स्लो प्रोग्रेस इन इंस्टीट्यूशनलाइजेशन of BIMSTEC. That needs to be addressed. Institutionalization gap. What else? Summits have been infrequent. Summits have been infrequent. Meaning what? कितनी summits हुई हैं BIMSTEC की? Again, current affairs. 5 summits so far. यही करंट अफेयर्स में तो 5वीं समिट न्यूज में था कि नहीं था? 5th समिट, वेयर डिड इट टेक प्लेस? कहां हुई 5th समिट? को किसने होस्ट किया? काठमांडू में तो 2018 में हुई थी भैया। 4th समिट श्रीलंका, कोलंबो, राइट? कोलंबो, 4th समिट टुक प्लेस इन कोलंबो। सो ओनली 5 समिट्स इन हाउ मेनी ईयर्स? मोर देन 20 ईयर्स of its existence, ना है ना? 20 years, 1997 to 2017, 20 years, और इस साल कितने हो जाएंगे? 25 साल, 25 years। तो मतलब 25 years में आप वो माइलस्टोन्स बनाते हैं ना, गोल्डन जुबली, सिल्वर जुबली, इतना टाइम हो गया, लेकिन ओनली 5 समिट्स। सो समिट्स हैव बीन इनफ्रीक्वेंट। देन लैक ऑफ any major agreement so far। इतने साल से हैं, बातचीत कर रहे हैं, अभी तक कोई एग्रीमेंट नहीं हुआ। सार्क में कम से कम एग्रीमेंट तो हुए हैं, बिम्स्टेक पे कोई मेजर एग्रीमेंट नहीं हुआ है। सो नो मेजर एग्रीमेंट सो फार। व्हाट एल्स कैन बी से एज अ वीकनेस? भाई जिनको भी देखने में दिक्कत आ रही है मुझे सुनते भी जाओ, ये मैं आपसे कह रहा हूं बार बार, राइट? So what else is the problem? What else is the problem? Lack of connectivity. आपस में बात करना बंद कीजिए, राइट? लैक ऑफ कनेक्टिविटी। थोड़ी देर बाद फ्रीडम है आपको, राइट? थोड़ा सा इंपल्स कंट्रोल कर लीजिए, राइट? सो लैक ऑफ कनेक्टिविटी। जियोग्राफिक कॉन्टिग्विटी इज देयर, बट are we connected efficiently? No, right? Can we be connected efficiently? Yes. And then we can say that BIMSTEC has had diffused focus, meaning historically what you would see, they identified 14 sectors of कोऑपरेशन। 14 इश्यूज पे कोऑपरेट करेंगे, ग्रुप बना दिया। इससे अच्छा होता 3-4 पे करते और ये कुछ मेजर एग्रीमेंट कर लेते। सो डिफ्यूज्ड फोकस, आपका फोकस ही नहीं है एक जगह पे, जैसे आपका फोकस नहीं है एक जगह पे। जब पढ़ना होता है तो हेल्थ ध्यान में आता है, या खाने की याद आती है। जब खाना हो तो मोबाइल की याद आती है। डिफ्यूज फोकस है ना? फोकस ही सबसे बड़ी प्रॉब्लम है ह्यूमन बींग्स की। And social media and mobile and internet are basically adding to that। अभी हमारा फोकस जो है एक चूहे के जैसा होता जा रहा है। Have you seen a rat moving? Still रह पाता है एक जगह पे? और a squirrel still रह पाता है एक जगह पे? और even a dog is still in the advanced stage, उसको सिखाया जा सकता है। Human beings are becoming like them। हमारा ध्यान कहीं पे है ही नहीं। आधे घंटे। What is the biggest challenge that you face while you study? जब पढ़ने जाते हो तो नींद आती है? नहीं आती है। इनको नहीं आती, बहुत सारे लोगों को आती है। यू गेट बोर्ड, डिस्ट्रैक्शन होता है, पढ़ने जाते हो कुछ और याद आता है। क्यों हो रहा है ये? बिकॉज यू आर नॉट ट्रेनिंग योर फोकस। 3 घंटे की क्लास तो वैसे भी फोकस की नहीं जा सकती, मैं मानता हूं, बट यही होता है कोचिंग का ट्रेंड। आपको ये ऐसा ही करना है। जब घर पे भी हो तो अपने फोकस को ट्रेन करो, अपने को याद दिलाओ कि दिमाग उधर जा रहा है, नहीं जाना है। All right, so these are the problems with BIMSTEC। अब आप जा सकते हैं घर, क्योंकि I see a lot of murmurs when we come in the next class। We basically end it here। मतलब BIMSTEC का थोड़ा सा एक 4-5 पॉइंट लिखाना है और फिर चाइना पे बात करेंगे. क्या बात करेंगे? चाइना पे बात करेंगे. ठीक है, ओके, थैंक यू वेरी मच. BIMSTEC BRICS outreach has been asked by others. So others BRICS BIMSTEC outreach. BRICS में K नहीं है. BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. That's a grouping. In 2016, India had hosted a meeting of BIMSTEC leaders and BRICS leaders. That is BRICS BIMSTEC outreach. आराम से यार, फर्नीचर के साथ दुश्मनी मत निकालो.